You sit down to watch a movie. Halfway through, you pause it to answer a text. Hours pass. You can't relax because something's off. Your mind keeps circling back to that unfinished movie. This feeling is the Zeigarnik Effect in action. It's a mental itch that nags you until you finish what you started. Bluma Zeigarnik, a psychologist in the 1920s, first noticed it in a cafe. Waiters remembered unpaid orders better than the ones already served and paid. Once they finished a task, they forgot about it. But incomplete tasks stuck in their minds. She ran experiments to test this. The results were clear. People remembered interrupted tasks better than completed ones. That's the Zeigarnik Effect. The mind doesn't like open loops. This matters more than you might think. It influences how you work, study, and manage your day. Think of the time you started writing an email but got distracted. Even if you forget the details, your brain keeps track of that loose end. It doesn't let go until you send the message. That's why people often feel stressed without knowing why. Their minds juggle too many open tasks at once. The effect doesn't just happen at work. It shows up everywhere. You start reading a book, stop halfway, and can't enjoy anything else. You leave a DIY project unfinished, and it gnaws at you. You walk away from an argument without resolving it, and your brain replays the last thing said over and over. These aren't random annoyances. They're unfinished loops your mind keeps alive. One reason the brain does this is to avoid forgetting important tasks. By keeping them active, it makes sure you'll come back and finish them. But that system works best when you only have a few open tasks. Stack up too many and you overload. Your brain turns into a cluttered desk. Nothing gets the attention it needs. This is why to-do lists help. They act like bookmarks for the brain. Writing something down lets your mind relax. It doesn't need to hold on so tightly because the task is safe somewhere else. Studies show that even the act of planning when and how you'll finish a task can reduce the mental strain. You don't need to finish it right away. Just knowing there's a plan helps. The Zeigarnik Effect also explains why we binge shows. When an episode ends on a cliffhanger, your brain treats it as an unfinished task. You crave resolution. You keep watching not because you want to, but because your brain won't let the loop close until the story ends. This isn't about willpower. It's how attention works. Writers and teachers use this effect on purpose. A teacher might start a lesson by asking a question without answering it. That creates tension. Students stay alert, waiting for the answer. Writers begin stories with a mystery, then hold off on the solution. Your brain stays locked in, needing closure. Marketing sometimes tries to tap into this by leaving questions open in your mind. It's not always ethical, but it works. The same principle can work in reverse too. You can use it to push yourself forward. If you struggle to start a task, commit to just 5 minutes. Often, once you begin, your brain starts tracking it as an open loop. That mental nudge will push you to keep going. You'll want to finish just to quiet the nagging feeling. This effect can help with memory too. Students who stop and restart study sessions tend to retain more. If you break study into chunks and leave off mid-topic, your brain keeps processing the material. It's not just repetition that helps memory, it's tension. That slight discomfort of incompletion makes the topic stick. You remember better because your brain flags it as unresolved. But there's a downside. If you don't manage these mental tabs, they can build up. People lie awake at night thinking about what they didn't finish. The mind doesn't care if a task is important or trivial. Left open, it carries the same weight. That's why unfinished chores can feel as heavy as missed deadlines. It's not the size of the task, it's whether it's done. Some try to ignore this tension, but it rarely works. Denial doesn't close the loop. Sometimes just acknowledging the task helps. Saying out loud, "I'll finish that tomorrow at 10, gives the brain a reason to pause the alert. You give it structure, and that brings relief. Imagine a day full of meetings. After each one, there are follow-ups, emails to send, notes to write, next steps to plan. You don't finish any of them, just jump to the next call. By evening, you feel exhausted. That's not from the work itself. It's from all the unclosed loops your brain is holding open. You never got to release them. Now picture handling one thing at a time. You finish a call, send the email, file the notes, then move on. Fewer open loops mean less mental drag. It's not about doing more. It's about finishing what you start. That's what clears space in your head. The Zeigarnik Effect shows that we're not just working on tasks, we're carrying them. Every unfinished task weighs something. Not much at first, but over time it adds up. If you want to lighten the load, the answer isn't always to do more. Sometimes it's to finish what's already in motion. Close the loops. Free the mind. You pass the same coffee shop every morning on your way to work. You've never been inside. Still, you feel a kind of pull toward it. You don't know why, but something about it feels familiar and comfortable. That feeling doesn't come from the coffee or the design. It comes from repetition. This is the mere exposure effect at work. The more we see something, the more we tend to like it, even if we don't interact with it or notice it much. Psychologist Robert Zeigarnik studied this effect in the 1960s. He showed people nonsense words and random faces. Some of these words or faces were shown once, others many times. People rated the ones they had seen more often as more pleasant or trustworthy, even when they didn't remember seeing them before. Repetition changed how they felt. It didn't matter if the exposure was brief. It didn't even matter if they were paying attention. This happens in real life more than most people realize. You hear a song on the radio that you don't care for. A week later, it's still playing. At first, it's just background noise. Then you catch yourself humming it. A few more listens and you like it. You didn't decide to like it. Your brain got used to it. Familiarity created comfort. Comfort turned into preference. You see the same effect with faces. In classrooms and offices, people tend to like others they see often, even if they never speak to them. Someone who shares your subway route every day becomes more likable than a stranger, just because your brain has stored their face. Familiarity doesn't guarantee friendship, but it raises the odds that you'll feel good around that person. This effect shows up in marketing too, but it doesn't need to be about products. Think about political signs or slogans. You see the same message over and over. You may not even read it closely. Still, the repetition builds a sense of trust or agreement. You're not being tricked. It's just how memory and attention work. The brain favors what it knows. Even logos use this principle. You might not pay attention to the logo on your bank's app or your phone's lock screen, but that repeated visual builds a sense of reliability. You don't need to feel excited about it. The fact that it's there again and again makes it feel more stable, more familiar, and less risky. That's the effect in action. It also explains how people form habits. A new cafe opens. You go once, then you go again the next week. Over time, you don't even think about it. It becomes your spot. There might be better places nearby, but this one is familiar. That counts for more than most people admit. It's not logic, it's comfort. You know what to expect, and your brain rewards you for that. In classrooms, teachers use this effect to help students learn. Repeated exposure to a concept or problem builds understanding, but it also builds trust. A student who sees a word again and again starts to believe they know it. Even if they never stop to study it on purpose, that repetition creates ease. This doesn't replace learning, but it softens the resistance. It lowers the mental barrier. Social media takes this to another level. You follow someone whose content you don't like much. Over time, as their posts keep showing up, you may start to feel less annoyed and more neutral. Then, without planning to, you start to like some of it. That shift isn't always about quality. It's about exposure. You've seen it enough times that your brain treats it as safe. Of course, the mere exposure effect has limits. If the first exposure is very negative, repetition might not help. If a song makes your ears hurt, hearing it more won't make you like it. But in neutral or slightly positive cases, repeated contact builds preference. You may not even realize it's happening. That's the power of the effect. It works quietly under the surface. Even in dating or friendships, this matters. People often grow close not because of shared interests at first, but because they spend time around each other. A coworker becomes a friend. A neighbor becomes someone you trust. Exposure builds liking. Then liking builds connection. We tend to think we choose people based on deep compatibility, but often it starts with simple repetition. This also explains why moving to a new city feels hard. You're surrounded by unfamiliar people, places, and sounds. Nothing feels quite right. Over time, as you walk the same streets and see the same buildings, comfort builds. The place hasn't changed. Your brain has logged the surroundings enough times that they now feel familiar. And with that comes a sense of attachment. You don't need to love something on first contact. That's not how liking often works. Instead, your mind tracks what it sees again and again, and it flags those things as safe, even pleasant. You end up choosing the same brand, the same route, the same lunch spot, not always because it's best, but because it's familiar. So when you find yourself drawn to something you once ignored, look back. Ask how many times you've seen it. You might not have noticed at first, but your brain did. The mere exposure effect was already at work. You like your name more than you think. Most people do. They may not say it out loud, but they show it in small choices. The name letter effect explains this. It's the tendency to prefer letters from your own name, especially your initials, without knowing it. The effect is subtle but consistent. People feel a quiet pull toward anything that reflects part of who they are. This idea came from studies in the 1980s. Researchers found that when people rated letters, they gave higher scores to the ones in their own names. Someone named Lisa liked the letter L more than most. A mark leaned toward M. The pattern held up across many people, cultures, and languages. Even when people didn't notice it, their answers revealed a preference. This isn't just about liking letters. It shapes decisions too. A man named Peter is more likely to move to Portland than to Dallas. Alora might like Louisiana a little more than Oregon. The connection isn't strong enough to override big life factors like family or work, but it nudges people. If they're choosing between options that feel equal, the one that sounds familiar often wins. One study looked at career choices. More dentists than expected had names starting with D. More lawyers had names starting with L. The numbers weren't huge, but they were higher than chance. This suggests that people may feel more drawn to paths that reflect their own names. Not because they planned it, but because it felt right in a quiet, familiar way. It happens in shopping too. If you're torn between two brands of coffee, you might pick the one that shares a letter with your name. You might not realize why. The label just feels a bit more appealing. Marketers sometimes take advantage of this. If they know your name, they can shape messages or product names that echo it. You'll feel more connected, even if the product is ordinary. This effect shows up in emails, usernames, and license plates. People often choose combinations of letters that include their initials. They're more likely to favor a plate that ends in JKM if those are their initials. The logic isn't always clear, even to the person choosing. It just feels right. That sense of rightness often guides behavior more than people admit. The effect reaches into relationships too. Studies show that people are slightly more likely to marry someone whose name shares a first letter or sounds similar. A Carl might marry a Carrie more often than chance would predict. It's not that they pick partners based on names, but that name similarity adds a layer of comfort. It's familiar. The brain treats that familiarity as a signal of safety. You can see this early in life. Children tend to prefer the letters in their names when learning the alphabet. A child named Emma will focus on the letter E more than others. She might even choose toys or books that feature that letter. It's a sign of the self taking shape. The name becomes a mental anchor. It's not just about ego, it's about identity. A name is one of the first pieces of language you learn that refers to you. Over time, it becomes tied to self-image. Anything that echoes that sound or shape feels personal. That sense of self creates small ripples in how you see the world. You lean toward things that mirror you, even if only a little. Not everyone responds the same way. The effect seems stronger in people who already feel good about themselves. If you like who you are, you're more likely to favor things linked to your name. If you struggle with self-image, that connection weakens. It's not just about exposure, it's about pride and identity. The name letter effect works best when the name means something positive to the person. It's not always helpful. In some cases, it leads people to make choices that aren't rational. They might prefer a less qualified job applicant just because their name sounds similar. Or they might overestimate a brand's quality based on how familiar the name feels. The feeling is real, but it doesn't always lead to better outcomes. Still, most of the time, the effect is harmless. It shows how much of our behavior runs on low-level pattern recognition. You don't need to think through every choice. Your brain takes shortcuts. It flags what feels like you. That includes names, initials, and anything that shares those basic shapes and sounds. Think about the choices you make every day, the usernames you pick, the places you visit, the brands you return to. Some of that may come from habit or price or convenience, but some part of it may come from this quiet pull toward what feels like home. Your initials in a corner, your name in the middle of a word, your letters echoed back at you. This isn't a flaw in thinking. It's a reflection of how personal identity shapes preference. When a letter stands out, when a name sounds close to yours, your brain notices. It leans in, and that lean, repeated again and again, starts to shape what you like, where you go, and what you choose. You go on a vacation that lasts a week. Most of the days are average. The hotel is fine. The weather is fine. But on the third day, you see a sunset that stuns you. Feels perfect. Then, on the last day, the airline loses your luggage and your flight gets delayed for hours. Months later, when you think back on that trip, the average days fade. What you remember most are the sunset and the airport mess. That's the peak end rule. Your memory doesn't store every part of an experience evenly. It highlights the emotional high points and how the experience ended. This rule came from research by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Barbara Fredrickson. They studied how people remember pain during medical procedures. Patients rated the pain they felt during different moments. The results showed that their overall memory of the procedure wasn't based on how long it lasted or even how intense it was throughout. It was shaped mostly by the most painful moment and how the procedure ended. If the end was less painful, even after a longer procedure, people remembered the experience as better. That same pattern holds true for pleasure, boredom, fear, or joy. The brain can't store every moment, so it takes shortcuts. One shortcut is to focus on the peak, which is the most intense part of the experience, good or bad. The other is to focus on the end. These 2 points become the summary in your mind. That's why a movie with a great final scene sticks with you, even if the first half dragged. Or why a boring concert still feels exciting if the last song brought the crowd to their feet. This rule affects how people rate customer service. Imagine going to a restaurant. The food is average, but one dish blows you away. Then, when you're about to leave, the server brings a surprise dessert on the house. You walk out smiling. That night, when someone asks how the meal was, you say it was excellent. The peak was the standout dish. The end was the unexpected kindness. Those 2 moments defined your memory of the whole meal. It also works the other way. If a hotel stay is relaxing but ends with a rude checkout or a billing error, that last moment sticks. You might tell others the place wasn't worth it. The ending turned the memory sour. The peak end shortcut works fast. It doesn't care about averages. It saves emotional intensity. The peak end rule explains why school years, jobs, or relationships can feel better or worse than they were. If a class was dull but the final project was exciting, the year feels worthwhile. If a job was stable but ended in stress or a fight, you remember it as tense. Even if the stressful part was short, it weighs more in memory. Theme parks and event planners use this rule on purpose. They design experiences with a clear highlight and a strong closing. A roller coaster has a huge drop near the end. A show ends with a big finale. These moments stick with you, shaping how you feel afterward. The goal is to make sure that even if some parts of the experience lag, the final memory remains positive. Think about doctor visits. If a long procedure ends with a gentle, easy wrap-up, the whole thing feels less bad. One study added an extra minute of mild discomfort to a painful procedure. The patients who had that extra minute, where the pain was less than before, rated the overall experience as better than those whose pain ended sooner. It wasn't logic. It was the memory shortcut at work. This can help in everyday decisions. If you plan a meeting or a class, try to place the most useful or engaging material near the end. people will remember the session more positively. If you're hosting a dinner, leave a strong impression with dessert or a warm goodbye. These moments help shape how the entire evening is recalled. It also works with personal experiences. If a date ends with laughter or a meaningful conversation, the whole night feels better. If a vacation ends with stress, it overshadows the rest. You can't control everything, but being aware of how the final moments shape memory can guide what you focus on. The rule applies to routines too. A workout that ends on a high note, like a favorite stretch or cool-down song, gets remembered better than one that ends with exhaustion or frustration. If you want to stick with a habit, consider how you end it. Leave yourself with a good feeling, and your memory will pull you back more easily. Even in conflict, the rule matters. If an argument ends calmly, with some understanding, the memory softens. If it ends with sharp words, that sting defines the entire exchange. You may not remember every detail, but your mind holds onto the peak and the closing note. The peak end rule doesn't mean that the rest of an experience doesn't matter, but it does mean that two key moments often decide how you feel about the whole thing. You remember how things felt at their strongest and how they wrapped up. That's what your mind saves. That's what shapes your story. A stranger knocks on your door and asks if you'd be willing to put a small sticker in your window that says, "Drive safely." Simple, harmless, and easy to agree with. You say yes. A week later, the same person comes back and asks if you'd install a large yard sign with the same message. It's much more noticeable. You're more likely to say yes to the second request than if it had come first. This is the foot in the door technique. The idea is simple. Once you say yes to a small request, you're more likely to agree to a bigger one later. Psychologists Jonathan Friedman and Scott Fraser first tested this in the 1960s. In one study, they asked a group of people to put a big, ugly sign in their front yards that said, "Drive carefully." Most people said no. But in another group, researchers started by asking people to display a tiny version of the same message in their windows. Later, when asked about the large sign, many more of them agreed. The first yes made it easier to say yes again. This happens because people want to stay consistent. Once you take a small stand, you feel a little invested. You've made a choice, and your brain wants to stay in line with that choice. Saying yes again helps you feel like you're being steady with your earlier action. Even if the second request is much bigger, you've already opened the door just a crack with the first one. It also changes how you see yourself. If you agree to help with something small, you may start to think of yourself as helpful or cooperative. Then, when someone asks for something more, you want to live up to that self-image. You're not just doing it for them. You're doing it to stay in line with how you see yourself. This technique shows up everywhere. In sales, a company might start by asking for your email address. That's a small ask. Later, they ask if you'd like to try a free sample. Still easy. Then comes a larger request, a subscription or a purchase. By that point, you've already said yes twice. The third yes feels like a natural step forward. In fundraising, groups often start by asking you to sign a petition. That's a small, non-financial request. Then, once you've agreed, they ask if you'd be willing to donate. You're more likely to say yes because you've already agreed with the cause. Your earlier action nudges you toward the next one. The ask grows, but the path has already been set. Parents use this too, sometimes without realizing it. A child wants a sleepover. Parent might hesitate, but if the child starts by asking just to stay a little later at a friend's house, and then builds up to the full sleepover, the parent is more likely to agree. The first yes lowers the barrier to the second one. In work settings, a manager might ask an employee to take on a small extra task. If the employee says yes, it becomes easier for the manager to ask for a larger favor later. The employee may not even notice the shift. Each yes feels like part of the same decision chain. The employee wants to keep being seen as dependable. The technique works best when the first request is small enough to seem easy, but still tied to the larger ask. If the two requests feel unrelated, the effect weakens. You can't start with a sticker about road safety and then ask someone to donate to a zoo. The logic has to stay clear. The second ask needs to feel like a natural next step. It's important to note that this doesn't rely on pressure. The power of the technique comes from within the person who's agreeing. The first small action makes them feel a sense of choice. The second action feels like a chance to stay true to that choice. That's what makes the response stronger. People don't feel forced. They feel consistent. Even technology uses this principle. A fitness app might ask you to track just one walk. Then it asks you to log your meals. Then it offers a full training plan. By that point, you've said yes a few times. You've started to see yourself as someone who tracks fitness. So the bigger commitment feels more natural. The key isn't trickery, it's structure. The small ask builds trust. It opens a door. And once the door is open, it's easier to step through. You've already taken a step in that direction. The technique just continues that motion. Think about how this plays out in daily life. A coworker asks for help reviewing one page of a report. You agree. The next time they ask you to help with the whole report. It doesn't feel like a big leap. You've already been part of the process. Your brain fills in the logic and guides you forward. It doesn't stop to measure the full difference between the first and second tasks. That's what makes the foot in the door technique work. It builds on the idea that we want to stay consistent with our actions, even when the size of the task changes. Once you say yes to something small, the next yes doesn't feel like a new decision. It feels like part of the same path. You buy a small bookshelf from a store. Comes in a flat box with instructions and a bag of screws. You spend an hour putting it together. A few pieces don't line up. You fix them. You tighten each bolt. When it's done, it wobbles a bit, but you feel proud of it. It's just a bookshelf, but to you, it feels like more. This is the IKEA effect. People place more value on things they've worked to build, even if the result is flawed. Researchers Michael Norton, Daniel Moshon, and Dan Ariely gave this effect its name after studying how people reacted to self-assembled products. In one experiment, people built simple storage boxes. Some participants built the boxes themselves. Others just saw the finished versions. When asked how much the boxes were worth, the builders gave higher prices. They didn't just see a box. They saw their time and effort. Even when the result wasn't perfect, they valued it more than an outsider would. This effect is common in everyday life. Think about cooking. You try a new recipe. It takes time and maybe it doesn't come out quite right. Still, when you sit down to eat, it tastes better to you than it might to someone else. The effort you put in adds value, even if you don't notice it. You care more because you made it. The same thing happens with hobbies. If you knit a scarf or build a birdhouse, it becomes more than just an object. You might overlook its flaws. You might even defend it if someone else points them out. That's not just pride, it's a shift in how you judge worth. Your brain connects effort with value. You invested time, and now the outcome feels like a part of you. This also shows up in the workplace. When someone contributes to a project, even in a small way, they often see it as more important than others do. Their effort shapes how they view the work. They might push harder to protect it or feel frustrated if their input is dismissed. It's not just about ego. It's about connection. The work feels meaningful because they helped build it. The IKEA effect also helps explain why people defend their own ideas so strongly. If you've spent time developing a plan, you see more value in it. Even if someone shows you a better option, it's hard to let go. You've already put in mental effort. That effort changes how you see the idea. It's not just a plan, it's your plan. That attachment can lead to better persistence, but also more resistance to change. Parents often experience this with their children's projects. A crayon drawing or a handmade card can feel priceless, not because of what it is, but because of the effort behind it. The value isn't in the paper or the colors, it's in the time spent. That's the same basic mechanism at work. When we see the effort, we increase the worth. Companies sometimes use this to their advantage. They let customers personalize products. Custom shoes, design your own t-shirts, or build your own meal kits all draw on this effect. When people assemble or customize something, they feel more invested. It's not just a product anymore, it's their creation. That sense of ownership makes people value it more and treat it with more care. It doesn't always work. If a task feels too hard, or if people fail to complete it, the effect can vanish. The key is that the work needs to lead to success. If the bookshelf never gets finished, you're more likely to feel frustration than pride. But once the effort leads to something you can use or see, the value goes up. This also matters in relationships. When two people work through a problem, they often come out stronger. The effort they put into understanding each other makes the relationship feel more meaningful. It's not just about smooth interactions. It's about the work. When something takes effort and still survives, we tend to hold it closer. Teachers use this when they assign group projects or let students design their own experiments. The learning sticks more when students build the process themselves. They might not remember a lecture, but they'll remember what they had to figure out on their own. The effort turns into memory, and memory turns into value. In daily life, this effect can show up in unexpected ways. You grow attached to a garden you planted, even if the vegetables don't grow well. You feel proud of fixing something at home, even if it's a rough fix. You like your old, dented car more than someone else ever could, because you've cared for it. The common thread is effort. When you put work into something, you tend to see it through different eyes. That lens can shape your choices. You may keep items longer, argue harder for your ideas, or hold tighter to something you've helped build. The value isn't only in the object. It's in the hours you spent, the problems you solved, and the feeling of having made something yourself. Your mind links effort with meaning, and that changes what things are worth to you. You don't like someone much, but they ask you for a small favor. Maybe they want to borrow a book. You lend it. Later, you notice something strange. You feel more positive toward them. Nothing about them changed. You did. This is the Ben Franklin effect. It's the idea that doing someone a favor can make you like them more, even if you didn't before. The story comes from Franklin himself. He once had a political rival who didn't respect him. Franklin didn't fight him directly. Instead, he asked to borrow a rare book from the man's library. The man agreed. Franklin returned the book a week later with a thank you note. Soon after, that same man became more friendly and respectful toward Franklin. The request had shifted something. This goes against what people usually think. You'd expect that if you like someone, you'll help them. That part is true. But the reverse also happens. When you help someone, your brain starts to justify the action. It asks why you would go out of your way for someone. If there's no obvious reward, the mind fills in the gap by adjusting how you feel. You start to think maybe you like them more than you realized. That shift makes the favor make sense. Psychologists tested this in controlled studies. In one experiment, participants won a small cash prize. Later, a researcher, posing as part of the study, asked some of them to return the money as a personal favor. Others weren't asked for anything. When asked later how they felt about the researcher, those who did the favor rated him more positively. A small act had changed their view. This effect works because of a basic idea in psychology: cognitive dissonance. That's the tension you feel when your actions don't line up with your beliefs. If you believe you don't like someone, but you do something kind for them, your mind tries to reduce the tension. One way to do that is to change how you see the person. You start to think maybe they aren't so bad after all. This shows up in small ways. A coworker annoys you, but one day they ask you to help move some boxes. You help, even if only out of politeness. Later, they don't seem quite as irritating. You feel a little more open toward them. You might not become friends, but the edge softens. That's not because of what they did. It's because of what you did. It also works in reverse with people you don't trust. If someone helps you, you might feel grateful. But if you help them, the shift is deeper. You've taken action, and your brain starts to justify that choice. It rewrites your view of the person to match your behavior. Salespeople sometimes use this without calling it by name. Instead of offering help, they ask for it. They might say, "Could you tell me which products you like most?" That small favor builds a connection. You've helped them, so your brain may start to feel more warmth toward them. It feels personal, even though it's planned. This doesn't mean you can force someone to like you by asking for something huge. The favor has to feel reasonable. It works best when it's small but meaningful. Asking to borrow a pen, help with a task, or feedback on an idea, these kinds of requests open the door. If you ask for too much too fast, people may pull back. The effect also plays out in classrooms. When teachers ask students to help with simple things, passing out papers, giving feedback, sharing an example, the students often feel more connected to the teacher. They've contributed something, and their brain responds by softening the relationship. That sense of goodwill builds over time. It's useful in conflict too. If two people don't get along, one small favor can shift the tone. It might be something simple, like holding the door or asking for help finding a file. The act doesn't fix the conflict, but it can start to lower the wall. The person who helps begins to feel more open, more invested in seeing the other as human. The Ben Franklin effect also helps explain why people who volunteer for a cause often grow more committed over time. They don't just support the cause, they've done something for it. That action increases their attachment. The effort changes how they see the mission and themselves. Even in friendships, this principle holds. Someone asks you to do them a favor, and you agree. Later, you feel closer to them. Not because they gave you something, but because you gave. You contributed. That connection deepens your sense of trust. It's a reminder that we don't just help people we like. We also like the people we help. The act of doing creates a sense of meaning. It forces your brain to explain why you did it. Often, that explanation turns into a new feeling, a shift in how you see the person, one small favor at a time. You spill coffee on your shirt right before a meeting. You walk in, sure everyone will notice. You try to cover the stain, sit in the back, and avoid eye contact. But no one says anything. Later, you realize most people didn't notice at all. This is the spotlight effect. It's the idea that you think people are watching you more than they actually are. Psychologists coined this term after running studies that showed how much we overestimate how visible our actions are. In one experiment, researchers asked students to wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a room full of strangers. Afterward, they asked the students to guess how many people had noticed the shirt. The students thought about half the room had seen it. In reality, only a small number had. Most people didn't even look. This happens because we are at the center of our own thoughts all the time. We notice every detail about ourselves, how we look, what we say, what we do. So it's easy to assume others are just as tuned in. But they're not. Everyone else is focused on their own thoughts, worries, and distractions. You're just one part of their day, not the focus of it. You give a presentation and stumble over a word. You think the entire room caught it. You replay it in your mind, wondering how bad it looked. But for most of the audience, that moment passed without much thought. They may not have noticed. If they did, they forgot it quickly. The spotlight effect makes you think your mistakes shine brighter than they do. This effect shows up in social situations. You walk into a party and feel like people are watching what you wear or how you act. In truth, most people are thinking the same thing about themselves. Everyone feels like they're under a spotlight, but no one is actually looking as hard as they think. The result is that people worry too much about how they appear when others barely notice. It also shows up in classrooms. A student might avoid raising their hand because they fear saying the wrong thing. They imagine the whole class will judge them. But most students are focused on their own understanding or waiting for the class to end. The fear is real, but the attention they dread usually isn't. Even on social media, the spotlight effect takes hold. You post something and notice a typo. You fix it but still feel embarrassed. You assume everyone saw it and judged you. The truth is that most people scroll past quickly. They focus on what relates to them, not small details about someone else's post. This can shape decisions in quiet ways. You may avoid going to the gym because you think people will stare, or you don't wear something you like because it feels too bold. You assume people will talk or laugh. In most cases, they won't. If they notice at all, it's brief. Their minds move on, but your mind holds onto the imagined judgment. Knowing this doesn't always remove the feeling, but it can help you manage it. When you start to feel exposed, it helps to remember how little you notice about others. You probably don't remember what the last 3 people you passed on the street were wearing. You don't recall their small mistakes or awkward moments. They don't remember yours either. The spotlight effect can also hold people back from speaking up or trying new things. You worry about being wrong, standing out, or not fitting in. That fear can stop growth. But the truth is that most people respect those who try. And even if they don't notice or care, it doesn't mean your effort is wasted. This effect isn't about arrogance. It's not that people think they're more important than others. It's about attention. You live inside your own thoughts, so your awareness is focused inward. That makes it hard to see how little other people focus on you. Once you see that gap, you can begin to act with more ease. Can even help in moments of regret. You say something you wish you hadn't. You think people will dwell on it. But most people are too busy thinking about what they said or what they'll say next. What feels like a spotlight to you may be invisible to them. This also works in reverse. If you want people to remember something, you need to repeat it. One message or one moment won't stick as much as you think. People need reminders. The first time they see something, they may not even process it. What feels big to you may barely register for them. Understanding the spotlight effect can change how you handle embarrassment, self-doubt, or fear of attention. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you realize most people are thinking about their own lives, not yours. That gives you more space to move, to speak, to try, and to forgive yourself when things go a little off track. Someone holds the door open for you. You thank them, then feel more likely to return the favor the next time you get the chance. This is the Reciprocity Principle. When someone gives you something, help, time, a gift, you feel a natural pull to give something back. That response isn't taught. It's built into how people behave across cultures and ages. The return doesn't have to match the original act, but the pressure to respond is real. Anthropologists have found examples of reciprocity in almost every known society. It helps people build trust and cooperation. When someone gives first, they create a small debt. Most people don't like owing something, even in a minor way. The easiest way to ease that feeling is to give back. In a well-known study, researchers had someone hand out small sodas to people in a room. Later, the same person asked those people to buy raffle tickets. The ones who got a soda, even if they hadn't asked for it, were more likely to buy tickets. The soda cost little, but it created a sense of obligation. That push toward balance made a difference in how people responded. You see this all the time in everyday life. A friend helps you move. Weeks later, they ask for a ride to the airport. Even if it's inconvenient, you feel pulled to say yes. Their earlier help still carries weight. That weight doesn't go away until something evens it out. The same happens with favors at work. A coworker stays late to finish a shared report. Later, you're more willing to step in when they need support. Reciprocity turns one good action into two. It works in small ways too. You offer someone a piece of gum, and they're more likely to say yes to your next request. A stranger helps you find your way in a new city, and you're more likely to help someone else soon after. These moments don't seem calculated, but they follow a pattern. Giving triggers giving. Marketers use this principle often. A store offers you a free sample. You weren't planning to buy anything, but after taking the sample, you feel more inclined to make a purchase. It's not that the sample changed your mind with its quality. It changed the emotional equation. You received something, and now giving something back, like your business, feels fair. Restaurants use it when they give mints or small extras with the check. Studies have shown that tips go up when waitstaff offer something small at the end of a meal. The gesture doesn't need to be big. The key is that it feels like a gift. When it does, it triggers the same response, a desire to return the favor. This also explains why people are more likely to say yes when a request comes after an unexpected act of kindness. If a neighbor mows your lawn without asking, and then later asks for a hand fixing a fence, you're more likely to agree. The order matters. Giving first sets the tone. It builds goodwill that makes the next ask easier. Reciprocity isn't always about fairness. Sometimes the return is larger than the original gift. A thoughtful gesture can carry more emotional value than a physical one. You write a kind note to a colleague. Later, they put in extra effort to support your work. You didn't expect it, but the act left an impression. They wanted to match or exceed what they received. Can also create pressure. If someone gives you a gift that feels too generous, you may feel uncomfortable until you can return something of equal value. That tension can make the principle feel less like a kindness and more like a contract. Some people use this effect to manipulate, giving things not out of care, but to create an obligation. The rule still applies, but it becomes less about connection and more about control. There's a version of this in conflict resolution too. If you take the first step to apologize, the other person is more likely to soften. Your move lowers their defenses. They may feel they should meet you halfway. That doesn't guarantee peace, but it opens the door. One gesture can reset the tone of a tense relationship. Even small acts matter. Holding a seat, offering help with a task, sharing information, these don't just help in the moment. They build something bigger over time. In teams, relationships, and communities, this principle keeps things balanced. It encourages action and response, support and return. The balance may not be perfect, but the motion keeps going. It works because people don't like to feel like they're taking more than they give. Most want to keep things even, or at least to show they noticed. A favor isn't just a nice act. It's a message. It says, I'm willing to give. And once someone says that, it becomes easier for others to do the same. The first gesture breaks the silence. The next one builds the connection. Each side moves because the other moved first. You walk into a store and see a jacket priced at $300. Feels expensive, so you keep browsing. You find another jacket for $150. It still costs a lot, but now it seems like a better deal. That $300 price didn't just sit there. It shaped how you judged everything that came after. This is the anchoring bias. It's the tendency to rely too much on the first number or detail you see, even if it has nothing to do with the decision you need to make. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman ran experiments to show how strong this bias can be. In one study, they asked people to spin a wheel with numbers from 0 to 100. After the spin, participants had to guess what percentage of African countries were in the United Nations. Those who saw higher numbers on the wheel gave higher guesses. The number on the wheel was random. It had no link to the question, but it still pulled their answers up or down. That's anchoring. It shows up all the time. A used car is listed at $18,000. You try to negotiate and bring the price down to $16,000. You feel like you've made progress, but that original $18,000 still shaped what you thought the car was worth. If the seller had started at $15,000, you might have offered even less. The first number acts like a mental anchor. It holds your thinking in place. You also see it in salary negotiations. If someone starts by saying they expect $80,000, the conversation tends to stay near that range. If they had said $60,000, the final offer might be much lower. The same job, the same company, but the first number changes the outcome. That's not logic, it's the weight of the anchor. In real estate, this bias has real effects. A house listed at $500,000 shapes how people view other homes nearby. Even if the listing is too high, it shifts what buyers think is normal. A similar house listed at $470,000 may seem like a bargain in that context. Without that anchor, it might feel overpriced. Retailers use this in pricing strategy. They list a product at $100 and then mark it down to $60. The $100 wasn't the real value, it was an anchor. It makes the discount feel bigger. The item now seems cheaper, not because of what it is, but because of what it was compared to. The anchor creates a frame. Anchoring works even when the number has nothing to do with the decision. In one experiment, researchers asked people to write down the last 2 digits of their social security numbers. Then they had to guess the value of random objects like wine or computer gear. People with higher digits gave higher guesses. Their own ID number, totally unrelated, pulled their answers upward. This bias also affects how people think about time. If someone tells you a task will take 10 minutes, and it ends up taking 30, you might feel frustrated. If they said it would take an hour and it takes the same 30 minutes, you feel satisfied. The task didn't change. The anchor did. Even in the courtroom, this bias plays a role. If a lawyer suggests a high amount for damages, the jury may end up awarding more, even if the figure was extreme. The number sets a range in the jurors' minds. They don't ignore it. They adjust from it. But the adjustment is usually too small. Anchoring doesn't need to be a number. It can be any first piece of information. If someone tells you a movie is amazing, you walk in with high expectations. If they say it's boring, you lower your bar. Your judgment shifts in response. The first thing you hear shapes how you weigh everything that follows. This matters in interviews, sales, contracts, and planning. If you lead with a strong number or a bold idea, it becomes the base others use. That doesn't mean you should lie or exaggerate, but it does mean the first impression carries more power than people assume. It sets the tone for what comes next. You can't always avoid anchors. Your brain grabs onto the first detail it sees, often without your awareness. But you can slow down your reaction. Ask whether the first number really fits the situation. Ask whether it's based on evidence or just the first thing that showed up. If someone throws out a number, pause before accepting it as a reference point. Being aware of anchoring doesn't make you immune to it, but it helps you think more clearly. If the first number you hear is random or extreme, remind yourself not to adjust from it. Start your own estimate based on the facts, not just the frame someone else built. That way, the anchor doesn't pull you somewhere you didn't mean to go. You walk into a bakery. The smell of cinnamon hits you first. It's warm and familiar. You feel relaxed without knowing why. Later, you're more patient in line and kinder to the cashier. You don't think much about it, but something small has shaped your behavior. This is priming. It's when a subtle cue, like a word, smell, or image, changes how you think, feel, or act without you realizing it. Psychologists have tested this in different ways. In one early study, people were asked to read a list of scrambled sentences. Some lists included words like polite, respect, and patient. Others used words like rude, bother, and disturb. After the task, participants were told to wait before speaking to the researcher. Those primed with polite words waited longer before interrupting. Those primed with rude words interrupted sooner. The words shaped behavior even though no one told them what to do. They weren't aware of the influence. Another study asked people to walk down a hallway after reading a sentence puzzle. Some puzzles included words related to aging, like retired, wrinkle, and Florida. People who saw those words walked more slowly, even though the words had nothing to do with speed. The idea of aging was enough to change how they moved. That's how subtle priming can be. The mind picks up on a cue, connects it to a concept, and then shifts behavior to match. This happens outside the lab too. If you see words or images related to money, you're more likely to behave in a self-reliant way. In one experiment, people who saw a screensaver with dollar bills were less likely to ask for help during a puzzle. The cue, just an image, was enough to nudge their thinking. They became more independent without anyone telling them to. Priming can also shape emotions. If you read a story about kindness, you may feel warmer towards strangers for a short time. If you watch a video that shows conflict, you might become more defensive or impatient. The content sets the emotional tone. You don't always notice the link between the two, but it's there. What you see or hear just before a choice matters. Retail stores use this in design. A grocery store may play slow music to make you move through the aisles more slowly. That gives you more time to see products and spend money. A clothing store might use lighting and color schemes that cue comfort or luxury. These choices aren't just decoration. They're tools that set a mood. That mood affects how you act, even if you don't stop to think about it. The same thing happens online. A news article's headline can prime you before you even read the story. If it uses fear, your brain starts scanning for threats. If it uses humor, you may be more forgiving of what comes next. The first cue creates a frame. Everything after that enters your mind through that frame. Priming doesn't need to be visual. Language does it too. If someone describes a person as cold, you might think of them as distant. If they say cool, the image shifts. The words you hear shape the expectations you carry. Later, you may treat that person differently, even if you haven't met them yet. This shows up in education. If students are reminded of a stereotype before a test, their performance can change. Girls reminded of gender stereotypes before a math exam often do worse. The idea is that the prime triggers anxiety or doubt. The effect isn't about ability. It's about mindset. The cue shapes confidence, and confidence shapes performance. In law, priming can shift juror judgment. If a lawyer repeats certain phrases like violent outburst, or reckless behavior. The words stick. They color how the jury sees the case. Even if those words are never directly proven, they frame the story. Jurors may not know why they feel a certain way. The language has done quiet work. The effect works in reverse too. If you're primed with calm or trust-related words before reading a news story, you may respond with more empathy. If you hear hostile or threatening words, you may become skeptical or resistant. This applies to advertising, politics, and news. The content you consume just before a decision can lean you in one direction or another. Priming works because the mind uses shortcuts. You don't process every situation from scratch. Instead, you lean on cues that point the way. The brain says, "I've seen this before," and brings up linked ideas or feelings. The shift can be tiny, but it adds up. A word here, a picture there. It steers you before you know you're turning. This doesn't mean you're being tricked. It means your mind stays alert to patterns and fills in the blanks fast. That speed helps you act quickly, but it also makes you easy to steer with the right cues. You can't avoid priming completely, but you can pay attention to the cues around you. When you notice the tone of the music, the words in the headline, or the images in the background, you gain a little more control. You spot the nudge before it moves you. You're walking through a new city, looking for a place to eat. You see two restaurants next to each other. One is nearly full. The other is empty. You don't know either place, so you pick the one with more people. You assume it must be better. That's social proof. It's the idea that in moments of uncertainty, you look to others to guide your decisions. Social proof works because people see crowds as a signal. When a group of people all do the same thing, it feels like that thing must be right or at least safe. You trust that other people know something you don't. In many situations, this shortcut makes sense. It saves time and reduces risk, but it can also lead to mistakes if the group is wrong. Psychologists have studied this through classic experiments. In one setup, participants were placed in a room with a group of actors. They were all asked to compare line lengths on a chart. The actors gave clearly wrong answers on purpose. The real participant, unsure of what to do, often gave the same wrong answer just to match the group. Even when their eyes told them one thing, the group's voice carried more weight. The pressure to conform was subtle but powerful. You see this effect in online reviews. When a product has thousands of high ratings, you're more likely to buy it. You haven't tested it, but other people have. Their choices give you a reason to feel confident. The higher the number, the stronger the influence. The same logic applies to streaming platforms. You click on a show because it's trending, not because you researched it. Popularity becomes proof. Social proof can shape behavior too. In a study on hotel guests, researchers tested two signs. One asked people to reuse towels to help the environment. The other said most guests in that hotel reused their towels. The second sign led to more people following the request. The message was the same, but the second one included social proof. It pointed to what others were doing. This also explains why people look to others during emergencies. If you smell smoke in a building but no one else moves, you're less likely to act. You assume they know something you don't. If even one person reacts, others are more likely to follow. The group sets the tone. You match it to avoid standing out or making the wrong call. Marketers use this principle often. Bestseller tags, user testimonials, and follower counts all point to social proof. They show that others have already made a choice. That makes you more likely to follow. It's not always about the product. It's about the sense of safety that comes from joining the group. It shows up in work environments too. When new employees join a team, they watch how others act. If the team speaks up in meetings, they're more likely to do the same. If people stay quiet, new hires stay quiet too. The rules aren't written down. They're copied. The group behavior acts as a guide. Social proof even affects what people believe. If enough others share a viewpoint, it starts to feel true. You don't always stop to question the source. The agreement itself is persuasive. This happens in politics, health decisions, and social issues. Seeing others take a stand often matters more than the facts alone. The group provides the signal. You can also see this effect in social media. When a post gets lots of likes or shares, more people interact with it. The first few reactions set a tone. Later ones follow that lead. This can create feedback loops. The post seems important because people engage with it. People engage with it because it seems important. Even jokes work this way. If one person laughs, others join in. You may not even find it funny, but laughter is contagious. The group's reaction tells your brain this is the right response. You copy it, sometimes without meaning to. Social proof is strongest when you don't have enough information. If you know what you want, you're less likely to copy others. But when you're unsure, new setting, new choice, high stakes, you look around. You take in what others are doing and use it to decide. That's what gives the principle its power. It fills the gap when certainty is missing. You also tend to trust social proof more when the group seems similar to you. A college student might follow trends set by other students, not retirees. A parent might trust advice from other parents, not singles. The source matters. The closer they are to your world, the stronger the pull. Social proof can help or harm, can steer people toward good habits, like wearing seatbelts or recycling. But it can also support bad behavior if the group chooses poorly. What matters is not just that others are doing something, but whether they're doing it well. The cue alone doesn't guarantee the right call. Still, the pull is real. You look around, see what others do, and often follow. That's not weakness. It's a human shortcut, one that usually keeps you safe, even when you don't notice it working. You meet someone for the first time. They're well-dressed, smiling, and confident. Within minutes, you assume they're smart, trustworthy, and maybe even kind. But you don't really know any of those things yet. What you've seen is just one trait, their appearance. Still, that one detail colors everything else you think about them. This is the halo effect. It's when one positive trait influences how you see other, unrelated traits. The term comes from early psychology research. People were asked to judge others based on limited information. When the person was described as physically attractive, participants also rated them as more capable, warm, or honest. Nothing in the description said those things. The good impression in one area created a halo that spread to others. This effect works in the opposite direction too. If someone seems rude or sloppy, people often assume they're less intelligent or less skilled, even if there's no link. One negative trait can cast a shadow over everything else. The brain fills in gaps fast, based on first impressions. You see the halo effect everywhere. In job interviews, candidates who are tall, confident, or well-groomed often get higher ratings, even if their answers are average. The interviewer doesn't always notice the bias. They just walk away thinking that person would fit well or seems sharp. The impression of one strength changes how they judge unrelated skills. Teachers can fall into this too. If a student speaks clearly or turns in neat homework, they may get higher grades on subjective assignments. The teacher may think the student is more organized or more engaged, even without solid proof. One good trait carries more weight than it should. The effect shows up in marketing. A brand with good design or packaging gets judged as higher quality. A product endorsed by a likable celebrity feels more trustworthy, even if the celebrity knows nothing about it. One good feature pulls the rest of the perception upward. In leadership, the same thing happens. A charismatic speaker can win support even if their ideas are weak. The charm creates a halo. People assume they must be competent because they speak well or seem confident. This can lead to misplaced trust or poor decisions. The first impression becomes a filter that shapes everything that follows. The halo effect can even affect legal decisions. Juries sometimes treat attractive or well-spoken defendants more gently. A person who looks nervous or disheveled might get harsher judgment, even if the facts are the same. The way someone presents themselves can change how fair others think they are. It also plays out in everyday life. A neighbor who smiles and waves gets seen as polite and respectful. If they forget to move their trash bin, you're more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. The first good impression cushions the later mistake. Think about online profiles. A sharp photo leads people to assume other positives. This person is smart, funny, or successful. The same person with a blurry or awkward photo may be judged more harshly, even if nothing else changes. The halo effect starts with a small detail and builds from there. This bias is strong because the brain likes shortcuts. Judging someone fully takes time and effort. So when one trait stands out, good or bad, the brain uses it to guess the rest. That guess feels natural even when it's off. You might not even realize you're doing it. The effect also shows up in how people rate companies. A single good experience, like a helpful employee, can make someone view the entire company in a better light. Later issues might feel less serious because the first impression set a strong tone. The same works in reverse. One bad moment can color the whole view, even if most experiences are fine. It can affect how parents see their children too. A child who's good at sports might also be seen as more disciplined or confident, even if they struggle in school. A quiet child might be seen as less capable when they're just reserved. These judgments stick and they shape how people treat others. Once the halo effect is in place, it's hard to undo. People keep noticing details that match their first impression and ignore those that don't. That's called confirmation bias, and it makes the halo stronger. It's not just about noticing something good, it's about deciding that everything else must also be good because of that one part. You can't turn off the halo effect completely, but you can slow it down. When you notice a strong first impression, ask yourself what it's based on. Is it one trait? Is it affecting how you see other things? Try to separate the parts. Someone can be charming but not reliable, neat but not thoughtful, confident but not kind. Being aware of this bias helps in making fairer judgments. Whether you're hiring someone, reviewing work, or meeting someone new, it helps to pause and look at the full picture. Not just the first flash of good or bad you see. That first trait might matter, but it shouldn't lead the rest. A teacher walks into a new school year with a class of students she's never met. She's been told that a few of them show unusual academic potential. She doesn't treat them differently on purpose, but she expects more from them. Over time, those students start to perform better. Their scores rise, they speak up more, and they show more confidence. This isn't just about talent. It's about belief. This is the Pygmalion Effect. It's the idea that people perform better when others expect them to. The name comes from a study done in the 1960s by psychologists Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson. They told teachers that certain students in their classes were likely to experience a growth spurt in intelligence. In truth, these students were chosen at random. They didn't have higher test scores or stronger skills. But by the end of the year, many of them had improved more than their classmates. The only difference was that their teachers had expected them to do well. This works because expectations guide behavior in quiet ways. If a teacher believes a student is capable, they may call on them more, give more detailed feedback, or show more patience. The student picks up on these cues. They start to believe in their own ability. They try harder, stay more focused, and take more risks. Performance grows not just from skill, but from a loop of belief and behavior. The opposite is also true. When expectations are low, people may stop trying. A manager who doubts an employee's potential might check in less often, avoid offering big assignments, or express less encouragement. The employee, sensing this, becomes cautious. They hold back. They meet the low expectations set for them, not because they lack ability, but because they're not given the space to grow. You see this in school settings, but it also happens in the workplace. A team leader who expects strong results from certain people often gives them more chances to lead, more room to explore, and more trust. Those employees feeling that trust often rise to meet it. Others, who sense doubt or indifference, may pull back or settle into smaller roles. Expectations shape who takes initiative and who stays quiet. Parents show this effect too. A child who's told, "You're good at solving problems," often becomes more willing to take on challenges. The belief becomes part of how the child sees themselves. But if a child hears, "You're not really a math person," they may start to avoid math, even if they had potential. The message, even when subtle, can steer effort and confidence. In group settings, the effect spreads. If a coach believes the team can win, that belief affects practice, strategy, and motivation. Players pick up on it. They act with more confidence. If the coach seems doubtful or passive, the team feels it. Energy drops. The outcome often follows the tone set by the expectation. The Pygmalion Effect also explains why mentorship matters. When someone takes the time to say, "I think you can do this," it changes how you approach the task. You may take it more seriously. You try harder to meet the faith placed in you. That doesn't mean you always succeed, but the belief makes you reach higher than you might have alone. The effect doesn't mean expectations solve everything. If someone expects too much too soon, it can lead to pressure. But when expectations are realistic and supportive, they often bring out better performance. The key is in how they're communicated, through tone, feedback, attention, and patience. It also helps explain why bias is so damaging. If a teacher, manager, or leader has lower expectations based on gender, race, or background, those expectations can limit how people grow. The damage isn't always loud or obvious. It shows up in smaller chances, softer praise, fewer invitations to speak up. Over time, these signals add up. The belief limits the opportunity, and the opportunity shapes the result. You can see the effect in reverse in self-expectations. If you think you're bad at public speaking, you may avoid it, stumble more, and confirm your own doubts. If you believe you're capable, even if nervous, you may prepare more and improve with time. Your own belief, shaped by past feedback and others' opinions, becomes a tool or a trap. That's why the Pygmalion Effect matters. It shows that performance isn't just about raw ability. It's also about the environment built around that ability. A single belief, repeated through tone and action, can change someone's path. When someone sees you as capable, you begin to act that way. When they doubt you, you may start to doubt yourself. Expectations set the frame, and the frame shapes what fits inside it. You find a $20 bill on the sidewalk. Feels good. Later that day, you lose a $20 bill from your wallet. The two events are equal in money, but not in emotion. The loss hits harder than the gain lifted you. That's loss aversion. It's the idea that people feel the pain of losing more than the joy of gaining the same amount. This concept comes from research by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They showed that losses have about twice the psychological impact of equivalent gains. Losing $50 hurts more than gaining $50 feels good. That imbalance affects how people make decisions. They tend to avoid risks that involve potential loss, even when the chance of gain is the same or better. You see this in how people invest. Someone may hold on to a losing stock, hoping it will bounce back, because selling would lock in the loss. At the same time, they might sell a winning stock too early, just to feel the gain. They act not to maximize value, but to avoid regret. The fear of losing outweighs the chance to win. In everyday choices, loss aversion shows up in how people react to change. A new policy at work that removes a benefit, even a small one, often causes more frustration than a new benefit brings satisfaction. People feel that something has been taken from them, and that hurts more than an equal addition feels rewarding. Marketers use loss aversion to guide customer behavior. Instead of saying, "Sign up and save $10, they say, "Don't miss your $10 discount." The second message frames the offer as a potential loss. That framing makes people more likely to act. The same idea works in limited-time offers. "Only 2 seats left" or "Sale ends today" creates pressure by hinting at loss. People respond faster when they feel they might lose something. Loss aversion also explains why people react strongly when their routine is disrupted. If you remove a feature from a product, users often feel betrayed. Even if the feature was rarely used, the act of losing it stings. Adding a new feature brings some excitement, but rarely the same intensity. People protect what they already have more than they chase what they could gain. In sports, this principle helps explain the pressure athletes feel when defending a lead. Coaches and players often play more cautiously to protect a lead than they do when trying to gain one. They fear losing what they already have. That mindset can sometimes backfire. Playing not to lose often weakens performance, but it feels safer in the moment. Loss aversion also affects negotiations. If one side sees a compromise as a loss, they may resist it, even if the final deal is balanced. To get agreement, you often need to frame the outcome as avoiding a bigger loss, not as gaining something new. That shift in language can make a big difference. In health decisions, people respond more to messages about potential losses than potential gains. Telling someone that not exercising increases their risk of disease is more effective than saying exercise helps them live longer. The risk of loss moves people more than the hope of gain. This can also influence how people approach goals. A person may stick to a savings plan more consistently if they know that skipping a deposit means losing a match or a reward. Loss pushes action. The threat of losing progress often works better than the promise of a future benefit. Loss aversion isn't always helpful. It can cause people to miss good opportunities. A student might avoid taking a tough class because they fear getting a lower grade. An employee may stay in a familiar but limiting role because a new one feels risky. The discomfort tied to a possible loss can stop growth, even when the odds of success are good. It can also lead to sunk cost fallacy. If someone spends time or money on something, they may keep investing in it just to avoid the pain of admitting the loss. A person might finish a long book they don't enjoy or keep pouring money into a failing project. The desire to avoid loss clouds better judgment. In group decisions, this bias can spread. Teams often choose safer options because the group wants to avoid blame for a loss. They may pass up better long-term choices in favor of short-term safety. The fear of being responsible for failure outweighs the value of potential improvement. Even children show signs of this bias. When given a toy, then told they might have to give it back, they show more distress than excitement when given a new toy in the first place. The moment something becomes theirs, it gains extra value. Losing it feels personal, even if they just got it. Loss aversion is part of how people protect themselves. It makes sense from an evolutionary view. Avoiding danger often matters more than chasing rewards. But in modern life, the same instinct can lead to cautious choices that limit progress. Recognizing the pull of loss can help people pause, think clearly, and weigh decisions based on facts, not fear. You walk into a grocery store looking for cereal. You scan the shelves and spot a brand you've had before. It's not your favorite, and it wasn't even that good last time. Still, you reach for it. You know how it tastes. You've seen the box 100 times. That's the Familiarity Principle. When something feels familiar, you're more likely to choose it, even when better options are right in front of you. This principle works because your brain prefers known things. Familiarity feels safe. It takes less effort to process. When you recognize something, your mind doesn't need to work as hard to figure it out. That ease gets mistaken for truth, quality, or trustworthiness. You go with what you know. Psychologists have tested this effect in simple ways. In one study, people looked at a series of shapes or faces. Some of them showed up repeatedly. Later, when asked which ones they liked more, participants picked the familiar ones, even if they didn't remember seeing them before. The repeated exposure alone created a sense of preference. It didn't matter if the image was neutral or bland. Familiarity made it feel better. This effect shows up in how people pick brands. Someone might keep buying the same detergent year after year, not because it works best, but because the packaging looks familiar. They've seen the ad, the logo, the color. It all feels safe. That comfort can outweigh objective performance. Even a product with mixed reviews can survive if people know the name. The same thing happens with people. If you see someone often, at work, in class, on your daily commute, you start to feel more comfortable around them, even without talking. You may not know much about them, but their face becomes familiar. That recognition builds trust. When a situation comes up that requires teamwork or a quick decision, you're more likely to turn to someone you've seen before than a stranger. Music works this way too. You hear a song on the radio and don't think much of it. But after the 5th or 6th time, it starts to grow on you. The tune becomes easier to follow. The chorus feels predictable. Soon, you catch yourself humming it. It's not always about liking the song. It's about knowing it. The same goes for movies or shows you've watched before. You might watch them again not because they're the best, but because you already know how they make you feel. The familiarity principle also affects hiring. A manager might favor a candidate who went to the same college or comes from a similar background. Even if it's not intentional, that shared detail makes the person feel easier to connect with. The candidate feels familiar, and that comfort shapes the decision. It's not always fair, but it's common. Politicians use this effect as well. They repeat slogans, stick to recognizable imagery, and appear often in local media. The more you see or hear a name, the more normal it feels. That feeling of familiarity can turn into trust, even if you know little about the person or their policies. The name alone feels less risky than one you don't recognize. This principle plays a role in habits. You might keep eating the same lunch every day because it's familiar, not because it's your favorite. You take the same route to work, shop at the same stores, watch the same news. These choices simplify your day. They require less thought. You don't need to weigh the pros and cons every time. You go with what you've done before. Familiarity can even shape how people respond to ideas. A concept that sounds familiar because you've heard parts of it before feels more valid. Even if it's wrong, it can seem more true than a more accurate idea you're hearing for the first time. This is part of why myths stick around. They feel true because they've been repeated. But this bias has downsides. It can lead people to stay in situations that aren't working just because they're used to them. A person might stay in a job that no longer fits because the routine feels safer than change. Someone might keep using software that's clunky or outdated just because they know how it works. New tools, even if better, feel like a risk. The familiarity principle doesn't mean people can't change. It means change feels harder at first. New things don't just need to be better, they need to become familiar. That takes time and repeated exposure. This is why first impressions matter. It's also why repetition works. What you see often becomes what you trust. This principle runs quietly in the background. You don't usually notice it, but it shapes many small choices throughout the day. What you wear, what you read, who you talk to. When something feels familiar, it lowers your guard. Feels easier, safer, more stable. Even if it's not the best, it feels right just because it's known. You have a choice between a cookie now or 2 cookies if you wait 15 minutes. You know the second option is better. Still, the first one feels more tempting. That's delayed gratification bias. The brain prefers rewards that come now, even if waiting brings more later. This bias pushes people to choose short-term pleasure over long-term gain. Researchers first studied this with the marshmallow test. In the 1970s, psychologist Walter Mischel placed a marshmallow in front of a child. He told the child they could eat it now or wait and get a second one. Some children waited, others didn't. Years later, researchers found that those who waited often had better life outcomes, higher test scores, stronger self-control, and more stable relationships. The ability to delay reward linked to long-term success. But the test also showed something else. Waiting is hard. The urge for an immediate reward is strong. The brain focuses on what it can have now, not on what's coming. Even adults struggle with this. People choose smaller paychecks now instead of saving for retirement. They buy things they don't need because waiting feels uncomfortable. Long-term goals lose to short-term comfort. The bias comes from how the brain handles time. The farther away a reward is, the less real it feels. $1 today seems more valuable than $1 next week. That's not rational, it's psychological. The mind discounts future value. In economics, this is called temporal discounting. The farther out the payoff, the less weight the brain gives it. This can show up in health. A person knows that daily exercise will help them feel better over time. But watching TV feels good right now, so they skip the workout. The health benefit is distant and abstract. The comfort is immediate and clear. The choice feels easy even if it leads to worse outcomes later. In money decisions, this bias shows up in spending habits. Someone might get a tax refund and use it for a new phone instead of saving it. The new phone offers quick reward. Saving offers no immediate payoff. The person knows what's smart, but the pull of the now is strong. The same effect influences how people handle work. You might delay a difficult task even if finishing it would free up your schedule. You do something easier instead. The long-term reward of finishing the big task loses to the short-term ease of avoiding it. The mind wants relief now, not later. Marketers understand this well. They frame products in ways that trigger instant reward. By now, pay later works because the gain is immediate and the cost is delayed. It flips the natural bias in the buyer's favor. The delay of pain makes the purchase easier to justify. But this bias can be softened through framing. How a reward is presented changes how the brain responds. In one study, people were asked to choose between $100 today or $110 in a week. Many took the $100. But when the offer was framed as 10% return in 1 week, more people chose to wait. The second version made the future gain feel more concrete. That changed the choice. Framing can also involve visuals or context. A savings app that shows future vacation photos or a countdown to a financial goal can make the reward feel closer. The brain responds better when it can picture the result. Abstract goals don't compete well with clear, present pleasures. But specific goals with visible outcomes start to close that gap. Delayed gratification bias also weakens when people break large goals into smaller steps. Saving $10,000 feels far away. Saving $50 a week feels manageable. Each small step offers a kind of reward. The brain tracks progress. That feedback becomes a form of gratification on its own. It gives the brain something to respond to now, even if the main reward is later. Some people train themselves to improve this skill. They build habits around waiting. They set rules, like no online purchases without a 24-hour wait. These limits reduce the number of impulse decisions. The rule creates space between the urge and the action. In that space, the person can think clearly. Children can learn this skill early too. Games that involve waiting or planning can teach them how to manage delay. Praise for effort over outcome can shift focus from quick wins to long-term growth. The goal is not to remove the bias, but to build tools to manage it. Even social pressure helps. When people commit to others, like a workout group or shared savings plan, they feel more responsible. The short-term urge is checked by a sense of duty or pride. That's another way to give weight to the future. Delayed gratification bias won't go away. The present will always feel more real than the future. But small changes in how rewards are framed, tracked, and supported can help people act in ways that benefit them over time. The trick is to bring the future close enough that the brain starts to care. You think of yourself as honest. One day, you lie to a friend to avoid an awkward conversation. Afterward, you feel uneasy. The story doesn't sit right. You tell yourself it was just a small lie. It helped avoid hurt feelings. You didn't really lie, you protected someone. This is cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort you feel when your actions don't match your beliefs. To ease that discomfort, your mind shifts the belief so it lines up with the behavior. This tension can happen in all kinds of situations. You believe smoking is unhealthy, but you keep doing it. Instead of quitting, you start saying things like, "My grandfather smoked and lived to 90, or "It helps me manage stress." The facts haven't changed. What's changed is how you interpret them. Your brain doesn't like contradiction. It looks for a way to smooth it out. Psychologist Leon Festinger first described this idea in the 1950s. He observed how people responded when their predictions or beliefs failed. In one study, he followed a group that believed the world would end on a certain date. When it didn't happen, members didn't give up the belief. Instead, they said their faith had saved the world. The event didn't match their expectation, so they shifted the meaning to reduce the gap. Dissonance doesn't always show up in dramatic ways. You might buy an expensive gadget and then realize it doesn't work very well. You feel regret, but rather than admit you made a poor choice, you start praising the product. You talk about its design or some minor feature. You focus on anything that makes the purchase feel justified. You do this not to fool others, but to settle your own mind. This process works quietly. You're often not aware it's happening. After making a hard choice between two similar options, your view of each one tends to shift. The option you chose becomes more appealing in your mind. The one you didn't choose becomes less so. The gap between what I chose and what I should have chosen closes. The brain doesn't like loose ends. You can see this in how people handle group loyalty. If someone joins a group that asks a lot time, money, effort, they often feel more committed. The high cost has to mean something. The brain doesn't want to believe it was all wasted. So the person starts seeing the group as more important, more valuable. The behavior, Commitment shapes the belief, worth. It works backward from what you might expect. Parents face this when making discipline choices. If a parent punishes a child in a way they later question, they might start to view the child's behavior as more serious. That makes the punishment feel more justified. It closes the mental gap between "I see myself as fair" and "I gave a harsh punishment." The new belief supports the action already taken. Cognitive dissonance also affects how people deal with new information. If someone holds a strong view and hears facts that challenge it, they may dismiss the facts or question the source. Accepting the new information would mean admitting their old belief was wrong. That creates dissonance. So the easier route is to protect the belief. This helps explain why people can hold onto false ideas, even when shown clear evidence. The effect shows up in relationships too. If you invest years in a relationship that no longer works, it's hard to walk away. The mind resists the idea that so much time and energy were spent on something that failed. So people say things like, "We've had tough times, but it's worth it," or "It's just a phase." These aren't always excuses. They're ways to reduce the discomfort between what someone wants to believe and what's happening. You also see this in work. If someone feels underpaid but stays in the job, they may begin saying they value the flexibility or the team culture. These things might be true, but they become louder in the person's mind. It helps resolve the tension between "I'm not earning what I deserve" and "I'm still here." The brain finds a new reason to stay. Dissonance is strongest when the stakes feel personal. The more something connects to your identity, the harder it is to accept a mismatch. If you see yourself as ethical, mistakes hit harder. If you see yourself as logical, you resist being wrong. To stay comfortable, the mind looks for reasons, reframes events, or shifts blame. It's not about being dishonest. It's about protecting the sense of who you are. Sometimes the process leads to growth. You feel dissonance, sit with it, and rethink your choices. You adjust your behavior to match your values. That's the other way to reduce the tension, by changing what you do. But often, it's the belief that moves, not the action. The brain takes the path of least resistance. This happens to everyone. You eat something unhealthy and call it a reward. You put off a task and say you work better under pressure. You avoid conflict and say it wasn't worth your time. These aren't just excuses. They're tools the brain uses to make peace with itself. You walk past a bakery and see a sign, "Last 2 croissants left." You weren't even hungry, but now you want one. You tell yourself it's because they must be good. But the real reason is simpler. They're almost gone. This is the scarcity principle. When something is rare or appears to be, it feels more valuable, often without any real proof that it is. Psychologists first studied this by offering people a jar of cookies. One group got a jar filled with 10 cookies. The other group got a jar with just 2. The cookies were identical, but people rated the ones from the near-empty jar as better tasting. The only difference was the number. The cookies felt more special just because there were fewer of them. This principle shows up everywhere. Stores use signs like "Only 3 left" or "While supplies last" because it creates urgency. You see the item as scarce, so your brain treats it as more important. Even if you didn't want it before, you now feel the need to act. The chance to miss out changes how you think. Limited time offers work the same way. A sale that ends tonight feels more tempting than one with no end date. The time limit makes the offer feel rare. That pressure changes behavior. People buy faster with less thought just to avoid missing out. It's not always about the product. It's about the clock ticking down. You also see this in relationships. If someone seems hard to reach or less available, they often seem more interesting. If they suddenly show interest in someone else, they seem even more desirable. Their attention becomes scarce. The same person who seemed average before now seems special. The change isn't in them, it's in how rare their attention appears to be. Events and experiences use this idea too. An art exhibit showing, for one weekend only, draws a bigger crowd than one that runs for a month. People don't want to miss their only chance. Concert tickets labeled as almost sold out move faster, even when the venue is large. The fear of missing out often shortened to FOMO, drives the rush. Scarcity can also be manufactured. A product might be kept in low supply on purpose, not because it's hard to make, but because it creates demand. High-end brands do this with limited releases. They release a small batch of sneakers or watches. People line up or set alarms to buy them. The product isn't always better, it's just harder to get. This effect works not because people are irrational, but because scarcity is often linked to value in real life. When something is rare, like gold, antique books, or front-row seats, it usually is more valuable. Over time, the brain learns to treat rarity as a signal. That habit sticks even when the rarity is artificial. Scarcity also affects how people view information. A banned book or a restricted article often becomes more appealing. The fact that it's hard to find makes it feel more important. People assume that if someone tried to limit access, the content must be valuable or true. The restriction creates a sense of urgency and meaning. In group settings, scarce roles or positions also carry more weight. A seat on a board, a spot on a team, or a rare internship feels more prestigious. Part of that comes from the difficulty of getting it. People don't always ask if the role is useful or meaningful. They just see that few people have it and assume it must matter. The principle can even influence parenting. A toy that's sold out becomes the most wanted item on a child's list. Parents sometimes call different stores, search online, or pay extra to get it. The toy might be the same as others, but scarcity changes how both parent and child value it. Not all scarcity works the same way. There's limited quantity, like a rare item. Then there's limited access, like an invitation-only event. And then there's limited time, like a flash sale. Each one pushes a different kind of urgency, but they all feed the same reaction. People want what they might not be able to have. The effect is even stronger when the thing was once available but is now harder to get. A menu item that's been discontinued often gets talked about more. A feature removed from a software update becomes the one everyone misses. The loss adds weight. What's no longer available gains value simply because it's gone. Scarcity also changes how people treat what they already own. If you buy something that's hard to find, you're more likely to protect it or brag about it. The difficulty of getting it makes it feel more personal. You're not just holding an object. You're holding something rare, and that shapes how you view its worth. The scarcity principle works not because the object or opportunity has changed, but because the context around it has. The same item becomes more desirable when access is limited. Your brain reads that as a sign to act fast. That reaction is often automatic. You don't stop to ask if the thing is actually better. You just don't want to be the one who missed out. You walk into a store to buy jam. The display has 20 different flavors. At first, it feels exciting, so many choices. But then you freeze. Do you want strawberry, blackberry, or something more unusual? Should you go with what you know or try something new? After a few minutes, you leave without buying anything. That's choice overload. When you face too many options, making a decision becomes harder, not easier. Psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper tested this in a now-famous study. They set up a jam-tasting table at a grocery store. Sometimes the table offered 6 jams. Other times, it offered 24. More people stopped at the table when there were 24 jams, but far fewer actually bought anything. With 6 choices, more people made a purchase. The larger display attracted attention. The smaller one helped people act. Choice overload doesn't happen because people dislike options. In fact, people say they want more. The trouble starts when the number of choices becomes too large. The brain starts to compare every possible combination. That takes energy. It increases doubt and fear of regret. You wonder if another choice would have been better. You start asking questions that don't have clear answers. You see this with streaming platforms. You sit down to watch something and scroll through hundreds of shows and movies. After 10 minutes, you still haven't picked one. You're tired before you even begin. You might end up rewatching something old just to avoid making the decision. Too many options slow you down and lower your satisfaction, even if the content is good. Restaurants sometimes create the same problem. A small menu helps you focus. A giant menu with pages of choices can make ordering stressful. You look around to see what others are eating. You second-guess your pick. Even after ordering, you might not enjoy your meal as much because you wonder if another dish would have been better. Online shopping works the same way. You want to buy headphones. You search for options and get thousands of results. You open tabs to compare prices, reviews, features. Hours pass. You feel less confident than when you started. In some cases, you close your laptop and walk away. The search for the perfect choice stops you from making any choice at all. This overload affects more than shopping. It shows up in major life decisions. When students face too many college programs, or workers scan too many job listings, they can become stuck. They keep researching, keep refining the list, but don't move forward. They fear choosing wrong, so they don't choose at all. The weight of so many possibilities becomes a barrier instead of a benefit. Even small decisions can become harder with more options. Picking a paint color or a brand of toothpaste can feel overwhelming when the shelves are packed. People often simplify these decisions by choosing what's familiar or what someone else recommends. Not because it's the best, but because it ends the process. The cost of deciding feels higher than the cost of being wrong. Choice overload also affects how people feel after making a decision. When there are too many alternatives, people tend to feel less satisfied with what they picked, even if it's good. They think about what they didn't choose. This is called anticipated regret. The more choices you have, the more likely you are to imagine that one of the others might have been better. This creates a loop. You try to choose carefully to avoid regret, but the longer you spend deciding, the more pressure you feel. You want the best result, but that goal gets harder to reach as the number of options grows. So your satisfaction drops and your confidence fades. People handle this overload in different ways. Some rely on shortcuts. They go with the most popular option or a trusted brand. Others limit themselves ahead of time, only looking at a top 5 list or setting strict filters. These strategies don't guarantee the best outcome, but they lower the mental load. You also see this in group settings. When a team needs to choose between too many project ideas or tools, meetings drag. Opinions differ. No one wants to rule anything out. Progress slows. A long list of options feels open, but it often leads to delay or deadlock. A shorter list helps people focus and move forward. Not all variety causes overload. When the stakes are low, people enjoy browsing. Looking through a rack of books or tasting samples at a fair can feel pleasant. The trouble starts when a real decision is required and too many options are on the table. Then the task shifts from fun to work. Limiting choice doesn't mean settling. It means making decisions easier to manage. When people have a few solid options, they choose faster, feel more confident, and enjoy the outcome more. Too many paths can lead to a standstill. Fewer paths help you take the next step. You buy a coffee mug at a local market for $5. A week later, someone offers to buy it from you. You say no unless they're willing to pay $10. The mug hasn't changed. It's still an ordinary object, but your view of its value has. That's the endowment effect. Once you own something, you tend to overvalue it, even when it's no better than anything else. Researchers first showed this in a study with mugs. They gave one group of people mugs to keep. Then they asked how much money it would take to sell the mugs. A second group didn't get mugs but could buy them. The sellers asked for twice as much as the buyers were willing to pay. The simple act of ownership had changed how people judged worth. This isn't just about money. It's about attachment. Once something is yours, your brain treats it differently. You start to link it with your identity or your effort. The mug on your desk becomes your mug, even if it's mass-produced. That connection adds value in your mind, even if others don't see it. You see the endowment effect in garages and closets. People keep clothes they don't wear and tools they don't use. When asked to part with them, they set high prices or make excuses. I might need it someday. It's still in good shape. Often, the item has little value to anyone else, but it feels like a loss to give it up. The item has become part of the mental landscape. It shows up in online marketplaces too. Sellers often list used items at prices higher than buyers will pay. They see their possessions through a different lens. They remember the day they bought it, how much they paid, or how long they've had it. That memory inflates the value, even if the market doesn't agree. This effect isn't limited to objects. It shows up in ideas. If you've spent time building a plan or shaping a view, you treat it as more valuable. You see its flaws less clearly. You defend it more strongly. The idea has become yours. Letting it go feels like losing part of your effort, even if a better idea comes along. In workplaces, the endowment effect can slow change. A team might resist new tools or systems, not because the old ones are better, but because they've invested time in learning them. The old ways feel familiar. People feel attached. Replacing them feels like throwing away that effort. The loss feels larger than the gain. Homeowners often show this effect when selling. They set a high asking price because of what the home means to them. Family dinners, years of memories, time spent fixing it up. Buyers don't see that. They see walls, square footage, and location. The gap in value creates friction. Each side uses a different standard. Even small tokens carry this effect. People who receive a free item like a pen or a tote bag sometimes act as if it has real worth, simply because they now own it. They turn down trades or offers, even when the exchange is fair or better. Ownership creates value that logic doesn't always support. This ties closely to loss aversion. People fear losing what they have more than they enjoy gaining something new. Giving up an object, idea, or routine feels like a loss. And because losses hurt more than gains feel good, people hold on, even when it's not in their best interest. Children show this early. Give a child a toy for a few minutes, then ask to trade it for something equally fun. Many will say no. The toy became theirs. Giving it up feels like losing. Adults aren't so different. The pattern holds. Once you call something your own, you guard it more closely. The endowment effect also shapes how people react to changes in policy or service. If a benefit is taken away, even one that was free or short-term, people protest more than if it had never been offered. They treat it as a loss. The effect isn't tied to actual need or value. It's tied to the fact that it was theirs. This also shows up in subscriptions. Companies may offer free trials to trigger a sense of ownership. Once someone starts using a service, even for a few days, they begin to view it as part of their routine. When the trial ends, canceling feels like giving something up. That push leads more people to pay. The endowment effect doesn't just inflate prices. It can cloud judgment. People keep items, routines, or views not because they serve them, but because they've held onto them. Ownership turns neutral things into important ones. The more personal the tie, the harder it is to let go. It helps to know when this bias shows up. When you hesitate to get rid of something, ask if you'd want it if you didn't already have it. If you saw it in a store today, would you buy it? If not, your judgment may be shaped more by ownership than actual value. That small shift in thinking can help separate what matters from what's just familiar. Sure, here's the same passage with the $ changed to narration, using plain English. You walk into a clothing store and try on a jacket. It looks okay, not great, but not bad. The salesperson brings out another jacket that's bulkier, too bright, and fits poorly. You put the first jacket back on. Now it looks much better. Nothing about it has changed, but it feels like a smarter choice. That's the contrast effect. You judge something not by its own qualities, but by how it compares to what's next to it. The brain likes shortcuts. Instead of making each decision from scratch, it compares things. A product, person, or idea becomes more appealing or less appealing depending on what it's placed beside. A meal tastes better after bland soup. A hotel room seems luxurious after a night of camping. The same thing can feel different when the context shifts. This shows up in pricing. A company might place a bottle of wine on the shelf for $100, next to another priced at $250. Most customers won't buy the expensive one, but the $100 bottle now seems like a deal. On its own, it may have felt overpriced. But next to the more expensive bottle, it feels reasonable, even cheap. The presence of a worse or more extreme option changes your view of the one in the middle. Real estate agents use this too. They may show you a rundown house first. Then, when they show you a better one, you feel more impressed. The contrast makes the second house feel like a strong option, even if it's only average. You don't judge it on its own. You judge it against what you just saw. The same principle shows up in job interviews. A solid candidate looks stronger when scheduled right after a weak one. A presentation seems clearer when the one before it was confusing. Timing matters because your mind holds on to comparisons. You don't reset each time, you carry the last impression into the next one. People use this effect without meaning to. When you describe a friend as more patient than Sarah, you're not saying they're truly patient. You're saying they're more patient than someone else. The comparison shapes the meaning. Without knowing Sarah, you can't know how patient your friend really is. Contrast also affects how people see themselves. After spending time with someone very successful or very wealthy, you may feel less confident, even if your own achievements haven't changed. On the other hand, being around someone who seems unmotivated can make you feel more driven or focused. The way you judge yourself shifts depending on who's nearby. In advertising, this effect plays a clear role. A product is often shown next to something outdated or awkward. A new phone sits next to a slow, bulky model. The point isn't just to highlight the features, it's to create contrast. That difference makes the new product feel more advanced, even if the upgrade is minor. Restaurants sometimes use decoy items on the menu. They'll list a very expensive dish to make the other pricey options seem more reasonable. Few people order the decoy, but it shifts how the other items feel. The contrast makes them easier to accept. Your decision changes even if you don't notice why. This bias can also skew fairness. A grade of 75 feels different if everyone else got 60 versus 90. The number stays the same, but the context changes how you feel about it. The same goes for raises, recognition, and feedback. People care less about the number itself and more about how it compares to others. It affects how people evaluate effort. An employee who improves from poor to average may get more praise than one who stays consistently good. The contrast between poor and better feels more impressive than steady performance. People notice change more than they notice quality. Even physical appearance is judged this way. If someone is described as good-looking, it depends on what standard you're using. Surrounded by less attractive people, they seem more attractive. In a room full of models, they may seem average. The same face judged by a shifting standard. This principle isn't always negative. It can be used to make better decisions. Comparing two weak options may help you realize neither is right. Seeing a range of quality can sharpen your sense of what works. But when contrast is used to guide decisions subtly, it can push people toward choices they wouldn't make if they viewed things on their own. Knowing the contrast effect exists won't stop it from happening, but it can slow you down. When something feels appealing, ask what you're comparing it to. Would you still want it if you hadn't seen the worst version first? Would you still believe the idea if it stood alone? Most people don't realize how much context shapes judgment. But once you start noticing it, you'll see it in small decisions and big ones. You'll see how stores lay out products, how meetings are scheduled, how feedback is framed. You'll see how a mediocre choice can feel better than it is, not because it's good, but because of what's standing beside it. You walk into a room where people are laughing. You don't know the joke, but you start to smile. Later, you talk to someone who's upset. Their voice is low, their face tense. After a few minutes, you feel your mood shift too. You didn't choose to feel that way. It just happened. This is emotional contagion. It's the process where you pick up and reflect the emotions of people around you without trying to. This response starts fast. You see a frown, and your own face tenses. You hear a joyful tone, and your voice lifts. These changes can happen before you even notice them. Researchers believe this starts with something called mimicry. When you see someone's expression, your muscles subtly mirror it. That small shift in your body sends a message back to your brain. Your mind uses your expression to guess what you're feeling. So when you copy a smile, you start to feel a little happier. When you mirror a sigh or slumped shoulders, you feel more tired or down. Emotional contagion happens in everyday settings. In a classroom, one bored student can affect the mood of those around them. In a workplace, a manager's stress can spread to the whole team. If a leader walks into the room calm and steady, that mood can settle others, even if they don't say much. People look for emotional cues. Once one person sets the tone, others begin to match it. Group behavior amplifies this effect. In a crowd at a concert or a protest, emotions can rise quickly. You feel more energized or more angry not just because of the event, but because of the people beside you. Their body language, their volume, their facial expressions. All of it becomes part of your experience. You don't have to talk to anyone for this to happen. Your brain picks up on the group signals and adjusts your emotional state to fit. This effect also plays out in families. A parent's mood often sets the mood for the household. If they're tense, others grow quiet or uneasy. If they're cheerful, the space feels lighter. Children, in particular, tend to absorb the emotions of those closest to them. They may not have the words to explain it, but they feel it deeply and reflect it back in their own behavior. Even digital spaces trigger this effect. A message with strong emotion can influence your state, even through a screen. A harsh email or angry comment online can leave you feeling unsettled. On the other hand, kind words or a message with humor can lift your mood. The source doesn't have to be face-to-face. Tone, timing, and phrasing all carry emotional weight. This helps explain why tone matters so much in leadership, teaching, and care work. When someone in a position of influence stays calm during stress, they help others do the same. Their mood acts like a stabilizer. If they panic, others panic too. The team or group doesn't just follow what the leader says. They follow how the leader feels. Emotional contagion can be helpful. It builds connection. It helps people feel empathy. When someone close to you is grieving, you often feel sadness too. Not because you're trying to, but because your body and mind are wired to respond. That shared emotion brings people closer, creates a sense of we're in this together. But it also means negative emotions can spread fast and stay longer than you expect. In high-pressure jobs, this effect can wear people down. Healthcare workers, teachers, and customer service staff often absorb the stress or frustration of others. Even if they stay outwardly calm, their bodies take in that tension. Over time, this emotional load can lead to burnout. The feelings don't always belong to them, but they still feel them. They carry them home. Friendships and close relationships reflect this too. If someone you care about is anxious or withdrawn, you may start to feel restless or low yourself. The stronger the bond, the stronger the effect. That's why it's often harder to stay calm around someone you love when they're upset. Your emotional systems are linked. Not everyone is equally sensitive to this effect. Some people are more emotionally open or more observant of others. They tend to catch moods quickly. Others may be less affected, especially in unfamiliar settings. But in close relationships and tight groups, almost everyone responds in some way. The brain is tuned to look for cues, especially in people it knows well. You can't stop emotional contagion entirely, but you can be aware of it. If you notice a mood shift, pause and ask if it started with you. Sometimes just recognizing that the feeling came from someone else can help you manage it. Breathing, stepping away, or grounding yourself in your own thoughts can keep you from getting pulled in too far. You can also use this effect for good. A calm voice, a steady gaze, or a relaxed posture can help lower tension in a room. A small joke or a genuine smile can lift someone else's mood. These shifts don't have to be big. Often, it's the subtle emotional tone that sets the course for how others feel. And once one person changes, others often follow. You sit across from someone during a conversation. They cross their arms, so you do the same a few seconds later. They take a sip of water, and soon after, you take one too. Neither of you mentions it. Neither of you plans it. But it happens. That's the chameleon effect. It's the natural, unconscious tendency to mirror the gestures, expressions, or posture of the person you're with. And it does more than copy movement, it helps build connection. Researchers first studied this in the 1990s. They found that when people subtly mimic each other during conversation, they tend to feel more comfortable and more connected. The person being mimicked often doesn't notice the copying, but they still respond with more warmth. The body reads the gestures as a sign of similarity, and people tend to like others who seem similar. This effect doesn't depend on perfect imitation. It's not about copying every move. It's about small, natural shifts. If someone leans in, you may lean in too. If they nod, you nod back. These small moments often go unnoticed, but they send a signal. I'm with you. I'm paying attention. That signal helps build trust. The chameleon effect shows up in all kinds of settings. In job interviews, candidates who match the tone and posture of the interviewer often make a better impression. In sales, people who mirror a customer's pace of speech or body language tend to close more deals. The buyer may not know why they feel more comfortable, but they do. It's the same in friendships. If two people get along, you'll often see them move in sync. They smile at the same time, shift in their seats together, even mirror breathing patterns. These signs aren't rehearsed. They grow naturally out of attention and emotional connection. The brain picks up cues and matches them without thinking. Even voice tone can be mirrored. If someone speaks with a calm, steady rhythm, and you match that rhythm, it builds a sense of ease. If they use more energy and faster speech, a similar tone helps create alignment. The key is not to copy directly or force a pattern. Forced mimicry feels strange and can backfire. But natural, subtle shifts in voice or motion help people feel seen. Children do this often. A child who wants to connect with a parent may start to mimic their gestures or tone. They may laugh when the parent laughs or frown when the parent does. Over time, this becomes part of how they learn emotional cues and build bonds. Adults do the same thing, though they rarely notice it. In tense situations, mirroring can lower conflict. If someone's upset but sees you matching their body language in a calm way, nodding, sitting still, keeping your voice even, they may start to mirror you in return. That shift in rhythm can help defuse tension. You show empathy through motion, not just words. People who are especially socially aware tend to mimic more often. These are the people who seem easy to talk to, who get your mood, who seem to know how to respond. One reason they connect so well is that they mirror naturally. Their attention to the other person leads to subtle shifts in their own behavior. But the effect can be disrupted by distraction. If someone's multitasking or thinking about something else, they're less likely to mirror. That's one reason conversations feel flat when one person is only half engaged. The nonverbal cues are missing, and the emotional rhythm doesn't match. The connection feels off. The chameleon effect isn't always about getting someone to like you. It's part of how people build connection without speaking. In group settings, it helps people feel like they belong. In one-on-one settings, it builds trust. It works across cultures and ages, though the gestures being mirrored may vary. Even small signs of mimicry, like copying how someone holds a cup or tilts their head, can strengthen the bond between people. The brain sees these patterns and draws a simple conclusion: we're alike. That feeling of similarity makes social interaction smoother. It opens the door to cooperation, trust, and even friendship. This doesn't mean you should try to mimic others on purpose. Intentional copying can feel strange or forced, and people can tell when something doesn't feel right. But being aware of the rhythm of a conversation, the pace, tone, posture, can help you match it naturally. It starts with attention. When you truly focus on the person in front of you, mimicry often follows on its own. The chameleon effect works because people are wired for connection. Mirroring is one way the brain shows it's in sync. You don't need to say much. A nod, a shift in position, a quiet pause at the same time as the other person. These subtle movements say, "I'm with you," and that simple message can shape how others feel about you more than any words you say. You tell your friends you've signed up for a 10K race. You haven't trained yet, but saying it out loud changes something. Now it's real. You've made a public commitment, and that pushes you to follow through. You start running in the mornings. You don't want to back out. This is commitment consistency. Once you make a choice, especially in front of others, you feel pressure to act in a way that matches it. People want to appear consistent. It's a trait most value in themselves and others. When someone sticks to their word, they seem trustworthy and stable. Breaking from that image can feel uncomfortable. The discomfort isn't always about others' judgment. It often comes from inside. You feel a pull to follow through so your actions line up with your earlier statements. Psychologists have studied this in many settings. In one classic experiment, researchers asked homeowners to put a large, ugly sign on their lawn that said, "Drive safely." Most people said no. But another group was first asked to put a small sticker in their window with the same message. A week later, when asked about the lawn sign, many more agreed. The sticker was a small step, but it mattered. Once they said yes to the first request, they felt the need to stay consistent with the second. The more public a commitment is, the stronger the effect. Saying something privately might shape your behavior a little. Saying it to a group raises the pressure. Social accountability kicks in. You know people will notice if you don't follow through. Even if they say nothing, you imagine they're watching. That thought alone changes what you do. This shows up in daily life. If you write your goals down and post them on the fridge, you're more likely to stick to them. If you say, "I'm starting a no-spending month," and tell your coworkers, skipping a day feels like failure, not just a misstep, but a broken promise. The public statement raises the cost of quitting. Businesses use this effect in subtle ways. A store might ask customers to sign a pledge to support a cause. Later, those same customers are more likely to donate. The first step, a simple signature, starts the process. Once people write their name, they see themselves as someone who supports the cause. That view nudges them to act in line with it later. This principle also helps explain why written commitments feel stronger than spoken ones. If someone writes down that they will attend an event, they're more likely to show up. The written word feels final. It adds weight. Breaking it feels like a bigger shift than just forgetting or changing your mind. People also want to stay consistent with their past identity. If you think of yourself as reliable, you're more likely to show up on time. If you see yourself as healthy, you'll feel tension when skipping the gym. The mind likes to avoid contradiction. When you do something that doesn't match your self-image, it feels wrong. So you adjust your actions to fix the gap. Commitment consistency can also lead people to defend poor choices. If someone makes a decision and then learns new information that contradicts it, they might double down instead of backing off. Admitting a mistake would mean breaking from the original commitment. That's hard, especially when others know what you chose. So people stick with the decision, sometimes even when they know it's not right. In politics, this shows up when voters stick with a candidate despite negative news. They've already said they support that person. Changing course would feel like admitting fault. So they look for reasons to justify their original choice. It's not always about the facts. It's about staying true to what they already said. In relationships, the same principle applies. Once someone says, "I'm in this for the long run," they're more likely to work through problems. The commitment, spoken or implied, becomes part of how they see themselves. Ending it would feel like a personal failure. That pressure helps keep people engaged, but it can also make them stay too long in a bad situation. Not all consistency is good. Sometimes people stick to things that no longer serve them. They stay with plans, roles, or habits out of loyalty to a past choice. The original commitment acts like an anchor. Letting go feels like quitting, even if the smarter move is to shift course. But in many cases, commitment consistency helps. It builds follow-through. It makes goals stick. It helps people act in line with their values. A public promise or small early step can start a chain reaction. That's why gyms ask new members to sign up for multi-month programs. That's why job training often includes writing goals at the start. These small moments shape later choices. Once someone sees themselves a certain way, generous, honest, dependable, they start to behave in ways that prove it. They don't want to contradict that view. And the more visible the promise, the more likely they are to keep it. The commitment shapes the behavior, and the behavior reinforces the image. You believe your favorite movie is a classic. You assume most people would agree. When someone says they don't like it, you're surprised. Maybe you think they missed the point. This reaction shows the false consensus effect. It's the tendency to believe others think, feel, or behave the same way you do. Your own views feel normal, so it's easy to overestimate how widely they're shared. This happens in both small and large ways. You may think everyone agrees that a certain food is delicious or that a certain habit is annoying. You assume your coworkers prefer the same kind of work environment or that your neighbors support the same local issues. These assumptions aren't always based on facts. They come from how your mind uses itself as a reference point. Psychologists first studied this by giving people choices in made-up situations. For example, they asked whether someone should report a coworker who made a mistake. After people made their choice, they were asked what percentage of others would likely choose the same thing. Most believed that their own answer was the common one. The same pattern showed up across different questions. People thought their decision reflected what most others would do, even when the actual results showed a split. This happens because people use their own mind as a shortcut. You know your own thoughts best. So, when guessing what others think, your mind starts with your own view and stretches outward. If you like hiking, you assume many people like it. If you dislike public speaking, you assume most others do too. This saves time, but it can distort your view of reality. The effect gets stronger in groups. When people surround themselves with those who share their views, they assume those views are more common than they are. A person in a political group, online forum, or workplace may begin to think their stance is the majority view. They don't meet many people who disagree, so they believe disagreement must be rare. The echo chamber reinforces the bias. False consensus can affect decision-making. In teams, a person may assume everyone agrees with an idea simply because no one speaks up. They may push forward with a plan, thinking it has group support. Later, they're surprised to find others had doubts but stayed quiet. The assumption of agreement replaced real checking. Can also cause tension in relationships. One person might assume their partner shares their views on money, family, or lifestyle without asking. When differences surface, the surprise feels bigger than it should. The expectation was that their views were shared. When that turns out to be wrong, it feels like a betrayal, even if it's just a misunderstanding. This bias shows up in moral judgments too. People often believe that their sense of right and wrong is obvious. If they see something as clearly unfair or clearly acceptable, they assume others will agree. When others don't, they question the other person's character or values. The gap in opinion feels like a personal clash because the person believed no such gap existed. Marketing teams sometimes fall into this trap. If everyone on the team likes a product or a message, they assume the public will too. They don't test the idea with a wider audience. Later, when it doesn't land well, they're confused. The team mistook internal agreement for widespread appeal. False consensus also affects how people see conflict. If you think most people agree with you, it's easier to dismiss those who don't. You see them as unusual, extreme, or misinformed. You assume the problem lies with them, not with your own view. This blocks honest discussion and makes compromise harder. Social media can make this worse. Algorithms show you content you agree with. Over time, your feed reflects your own opinions back to you. You see more of what you like and less of what you don't. This shapes the illusion that your view is not only common but dominant. You stop seeing how wide the range of opinions actually is. Even personal habits fall into this pattern. You may assume that how you spend your weekend, raise your kids, or eat your meals is typical. You don't think of these habits as special. But when someone does something differently, it catches your attention. You thought everyone else lived the way you do. The false consensus effect doesn't mean people are closed-minded. It just means that the brain leans on what it knows, its own experience. That experience is real but limited. Can't stand in for the full range of how others think and feel. To work around this, people need to check their assumptions. Instead of assuming others agree, they can ask. They can listen for difference, not just similarity. This takes effort, but it leads to better understanding. It helps avoid the mistake of thinking one voice speaks for many when it may only speak for one. You're offered a choice. Get $50 today or get $100 a year from now. Many people take the smaller reward now, even though waiting would double the money. This reaction is called time discounting. It means that a reward loses value in your mind the farther it is in the future. You know the bigger reward is worth more, but it doesn't feel like it. Time discounting affects more than money. It shapes how people eat, work, save, exercise, and plan. You skip the gym today for an extra hour of sleep. You promise yourself you'll eat better next month. You put off starting a project even though you know it will cause stress later. In each case, your brain gives more weight to what feels good now and less weight to what might help later. This tendency is tied to how the mind handles delay. When a reward is near, the benefit feels real. You can picture it. You feel the emotions it brings. But when the reward is far away, it becomes abstract. It's harder to imagine clearly. The emotional pull weakens. That shift makes future rewards seem less important. Researchers have studied this by offering real or hypothetical rewards at different times. The pattern is clear. As the delay grows, the value people place on the reward drops. $100 tomorrow feels almost the same as today. But $100 in a year feels much less valuable, even though the amount hasn't changed. The delay makes the value shrink. This bias leads people to favor short-term gains over long-term benefits. For example, someone may choose to spend money now instead of saving for retirement. They know saving is smarter, but the reward is too far away to feel urgent. The short-term action wins, even if the person regrets it later. Time discounting also shows up in health. A person might skip a checkup or avoid changing their diet, even though they know it could help prevent problems years from now. The future benefit feels weak compared to the comfort or convenience of the present. The cost of action is now. The reward is later. That imbalance makes it hard to choose well. The same thing happens in school or work. A student may delay studying because the exam is weeks away. An employee may put off planning a project until the deadline is close. The pressure to act doesn't rise until the reward or consequence moves into the near future. As it gets closer, the brain gives it more weight. This doesn't mean people are lazy or short-sighted. The mind is wired to respond more to what's immediate. In the past, acting quickly had survival value. Long-term thinking mattered less when daily life was about getting food or staying safe. That wiring still shapes choices today, even when the stakes are different. Some people discount the future more than others. This varies based on mood, stress, and environment. When someone feels pressure or uncertainty, they may focus more on short-term needs. Saving or planning feels harder when the present feels unstable. On the other hand, people who feel secure or supported are more willing to wait for future rewards. Marketers and app designers use this effect to shape behavior. They offer quick rewards like points, likes, or bonuses to keep people engaged. These small, instant gains pull attention away from long-term goals. The feedback loop is short and satisfying. Keeps people choosing now over later. Time discounting can also lead people to make inconsistent choices. For example, you might say you'll start a new habit next week. But when next week arrives, you push it again. At the time of the plan, the future feels far enough away that it's easy to commit. But when the day comes, the short-term cost returns, and the future reward still feels too small. This is why some systems use commitment tools. Automatic savings plans, for example, take money out before you see it. That limits the power of the present reward and builds the habit. Deadlines, reminders, and schedules help too. They bring the future closer by making it feel more real. People can also reframe future rewards to feel more immediate. Instead of thinking about retirement as a distant number, they can picture the kind of life they want later, where they live, what they do, how they feel. Adding detail makes the future more vivid. That can help reduce the discounting. Time discounting isn't about being reckless. It's about how the mind weighs outcomes. Today is clear. Tomorrow is foggy. The clearer and more immediate something is, the more power it has. That's why a small reward now can seem better than a larger one later, even when it isn't. Recognizing that bias is the first step to managing it. You can't erase it, but you can plan around it. You hear a word you've never noticed before. Let's say, fjord. That same afternoon, you see it in a news headline. The next day, someone mentions it on a podcast. You wonder if the word is suddenly everywhere. Feels like it, but the truth is, it's always been around. You just hadn't noticed. This is the frequency illusion, also called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. It happens when something new to you suddenly seems common. The illusion starts when your brain tags something as relevant. It might be a word, a car model, a concept, or even a song. Once it's on your radar, you begin to spot it more often. The actual frequency hasn't changed. What's changed is your attention. Your brain filters the world differently, giving weight to what it just learned. This effect has two parts. The first is selective attention. You start to focus on something because it feels new or important. The second is confirmation bias. Once you begin to notice it, you assume it's happening more often, and that reinforces your belief. You remember the times it shows up, and you ignore or forget the times it doesn't. You buy a red car, and suddenly you see red cars everywhere. Before, they were just part of the background. Now each one jumps out. You feel like something's changed in the world. It hasn't. You've changed what you pay attention to. Your mind is scanning for a match, and it finds one more easily than you expected. This shows up in conversations. Someone tells you about a medical condition you've never heard of. For the next few weeks, it seems to come up again and again on TV, in articles, even in casual chats. You wonder why so many people are talking about it now. But it's not a spike in discussion. It's a shift in your awareness. Marketing often benefits from this effect. When a product is introduced to you through an ad or a social post, you might ignore it at first. But the next time you see it, you notice it more. After that, each time you come across it feels like reinforcement. The product becomes familiar faster, not because it shows up more, but because you've started tracking it. This also plays a role in learning. When students study a new topic, they begin to notice it in places they hadn't before, in news stories, conversations, or other subjects. The connections feel sudden, even magical, but they reflect the brain's natural filtering process. Once an idea is active in your mind, the world seems to echo it. The frequency illusion can also influence how people judge trends. You may read about a behavior like a new fitness fad and then start seeing it in public. That can lead you to believe it's more popular than it really is. Your brain is looking for confirmation and finds it easily. But without actual data, you don't know whether the trend is growing or you're just paying closer attention. Social media magnifies this effect. Algorithms serve content similar to what you've liked or clicked. If you read one article about electric cars, your feed may begin to show more of them. This reinforces the feeling that the topic is growing. It may be, or it may just be your digital environment mirroring your interest. This illusion isn't limited to positive attention. It can happen with fears or frustrations too. If someone worries about crime, for example, they may begin to notice every news story that mentions it. Even if crime rates are stable or falling, the repeated exposure confirms their belief that it's rising. The pattern they notice feels like proof, but it's actually a result of how they're filtering what they see. The effect can also make stereotypes feel stronger. If you hear a stereotype about a group, you may begin to notice examples that support it. That happens even if those examples were always there and even if they're rare. The illusion gives more weight to what fits your expectation and less to what doesn't. In relationships, the same thing can apply. If someone says your friend interrupts people often, you may start to notice those moments more. You may even start counting them. The behavior may not have changed, but your attention has. That shift shapes how you interpret the person's actions going forward. The frequency illusion doesn't mean you're imagining things. The things you notice are real. What's changed is what your brain picks out of the noise. The world is full of patterns, but your mind only tracks a few at a time. When something new enters the mix, it gets more attention. That makes it feel like it's showing up more, even if it isn't. This pattern helps explain why people often feel like the universe is sending them signs. They learn about something, then they keep seeing it. It feels personal, but it's not always a sign, it's a mental habit. The mind highlights what matters to you in that moment. That can be useful for learning, planning, or reflection. But it can also lead you to see patterns where none exist. The illusion makes the world feel more connected to your thoughts than it actually is. You're told a medical treatment has a 90% survival rate. That sounds promising. Now you're told the same treatment has a 10% death rate. That sounds riskier, even though both statements describe the same outcome. This is the framing effect. It shows how the way information is presented can shape the way you understand and react to it, even when the facts stay the same. The brain doesn't just process data. It reacts to how that data is packaged. Words create emotional weight, and that weight changes your response. You're not only thinking through the logic of a choice, you're feeling it. That feeling depends heavily on the frame. This shows up in choices about risk. People tend to prefer sure gains over risky ones when the option is framed positively. But when the same option is framed as avoiding a loss, people become more willing to gamble. For example, imagine a disease is expected to kill 600 people. One program will save 200 people for sure. Another has a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 and a 2/3 chance of saving none. Most people choose the first one when it's framed in terms of lives saved. But if the same options are described in terms of lives lost, 400 people will die for sure versus a 1/3 chance that none die, people often switch their choice to the riskier one. The facts don't change. Only the frame changes, and that's enough to shift the decision. This applies in business as well. A product described as 95% fat-free sounds better than one that says contains 5% fat, even though both are equal. One highlights the positive, the other points to the negative. The message creates a feeling, and that feeling drives judgment. In politics, framing plays a major role in public opinion. A policy called estate tax may sound technical or fair to some, but call it a death tax, and the tone changes. People picture being punished for dying. The label shifts how they interpret the same legal rule. This is why campaigns and lobbyists spend time choosing their words carefully. They know language shapes support. Framing also influences how people react to statistics. If you hear that a vaccine has a 1 in 100,000 chance of a serious side effect, it may sound small. But if the same information is framed by saying, 10 people per million may suffer lasting harm, it may feel larger, even though the risk is the same. The frame makes the statistic more vivid. This effect shows up in everyday conversations too. If a friend tells you a job candidate failed to complete the last project, you may view that person as unreliable. But if they say, the candidate learned a lot from the last project and finished it under pressure, you might feel more open to the same person. Framing doesn't lie, it just shifts the spotlight. Retailers often use this to guide behavior. A sign that says limit 5 per customer can increase sales. The frame creates urgency and scarcity. It makes the product feel more in demand. If the sign simply said on sale, the reaction might be weaker. Again, the product hasn't changed. The words around it have. Framing also affects how people judge themselves. If you say, I only finished half of what I planned, it feels like failure. But if you say, I made solid progress on 2 important tasks, the same effort feels more valuable. Self-talk often follows framing rules too. The words you choose shape how you view your own actions. It's easy to overlook how framing works because it feels natural. The brain doesn't pause to check whether it's reacting to content or tone. But those reactions guide major decisions, from healthcare to finance to personal relationships. A well-worded statement can lead people to support a policy. A poorly worded one can cause fear or confusion. Even in negotiation, framing plays a key role. If you say, I'd like $10,000 for this project, it may sound like a demand. If you say, given the scope, a $10,000 budget would allow full delivery, the frame shifts. One version centers your want, the other centers the outcome. The second version often gets a better response. Legal arguments rely on framing too. One side may describe a person's actions as self-defense. The other calls it premeditated harm. The facts are the same, but the frame invites different emotional responses. Jurors respond not just to what happened but to how it's described. In relationships, this effect can help or hurt communication. Saying, you never help around the house creates a defensive frame. Saying, I feel overwhelmed and could use support changes the tone. The first assigns blame. The second invites cooperation. Both express frustration, but the outcomes will likely differ. Understanding the framing effect doesn't mean ignoring your emotions. It means recognizing that those emotions can be shaped before you even realize it. Language sets the stage for how you process facts. Once you start noticing frames, you can ask whether your reaction comes from the facts or from the way they're presented. That awareness creates room to slow down and choose more clearly. You wake up feeling low, and everything feels harder. You remember the time someone ignored your message. You think about a mistake you made at work last year. You remember awkward moments, missed chances, and past arguments. None of those memories are new, but they come to the surface more easily now. This is mood-congruent memory. When you're in a certain mood, you tend to recall memories that match that mood. Your brain stores all kinds of memories, positive, negative, neutral, but it doesn't access them equally at all times. It uses cues to decide what to pull up. One of the strongest cues is your current mood. If you feel sad, your brain looks for sad memories. If you feel anxious, it pulls up moments when you felt unsure or unsafe. If you're in a good mood, you remember times when things went well. The mood and the memory match. This happens without effort. You don't sit down and ask for certain thoughts. They rise on their own. The emotional tone of your mind pulls in stories that feel familiar in that state. That's how mood shapes your sense of the past. You're not recalling all events equally. You're pulling from one part of the shelf while the rest stays out of reach. This effect can shape how people view their lives. If someone often feels down, their memories tend to highlight failure, loss, or rejection. This can create a cycle. The mood pulls in the memory. The memory reinforces the mood. The pattern repeats and the person feels stuck. It's not that good memories don't exist. They're just harder to reach in that state. The same pattern works in the other direction. A person who feels confident is more likely to recall times they succeeded. If they feel hopeful, they remember growth and change. That mood draws in moments that support it. The person feels grounded in their strengths, even if challenges still exist. Researchers have tested this by first putting people in different moods, through music, storytelling, or feedback, and then asking them to recall events. People in sad moods recalled more sad memories. People in happy moods recalled more positive events. The pattern held even when the original events were emotionally neutral. The mood colored the memory. This also shapes how people judge the present. When you feel good, you may rate your life as more satisfying. Your job is more enjoyable. Your relationships is stronger. When you feel low, those same areas may feel more fragile or flawed. Your situation may not have changed, but the emotional filter makes it look different. In conversations, mood-congruent memory shows up in how people tell stories. A happy person may describe their past as full of lucky breaks and kind people. A frustrated person may describe the same past with more conflict or disappointment. The difference isn't just in storytelling. It's in what they remember most clearly. This effect also explains why moods can feel hard to shift. If someone wants to feel better, but all their memories support the current mood, it's hard to change course. A person who feels anxious may want reassurance, but the memories they access all remind them of risk or failure. The brain gives them more of what they already feel. Mood-congruent memory plays a role in depression and anxiety. In depression, the mind often focuses on loss, guilt, and failure. The person may forget or discount times of joy or success. It's not that those moments didn't happen. It's that they're not accessible when the mood is low. In anxiety, the mind recalls past danger or embarrassment. It stays ready for threat, even when there's no sign of one. Therapists sometimes help clients work with this effect by gently shifting the emotional tone. If a person can remember even one moment that felt safe or proud or hopeful, they can begin to break the loop. That new emotion opens the door to different memories. The person may start to recall other moments that felt better. Each one adds weight to the new mood. You can use this in daily life too. When you notice a low mood, it helps to know that your thoughts may follow that tone. You don't have to believe every memory that comes up. You can remind yourself that the brain is picking stories that match the feeling, not the full truth. You can look for other cues, photos, music, notes that reconnect you with a better state. This also explains why people sometimes reach out when they're struggling. Talking to someone in a different mood can bring in a new perspective. It interrupts the loop. The other person may help you remember a time you forgot. A small win, a good day, a kind word. That memory didn't vanish. It just needed a different cue. Mood-congruent memory makes the past feel more personal, more alive. But it also means your emotional state has a strong hand in shaping your version of events. By understanding that pattern, you gain more space to question it. You can notice the stories your mind selects. You can ask what else might be true. And with time, you can find ways to shift the mood and shift the memories that come with it. You walk into a room and people laugh. You assume they're laughing at you. Someone doesn't return your message, and you think you must have upset them. A coworker seems quiet today, and you wonder what you did wrong. These thoughts can feel natural, even automatic. They come from personalization bias, the tendency to believe that events, actions, or behaviors are somehow about you, even when they aren't. This bias isn't about being selfish. It's about how the brain tries to make sense of the world. You live inside your own perspective. You feel your thoughts, notice your actions, and track your emotions all day long. So when something happens, your first instinct is to see how it connects to you. That reaction feels reasonable because you're the center of your own experience. But this mental shortcut can misfire. Not everything that happens around you has anything to do with you. People laugh for all kinds of reasons. They're tired. They're distracted. They're thinking about something else entirely. But when you're nearby, your brain fills in the gap. They must be reacting to me. That story forms fast, and it can shape how you feel for the rest of the day. Children show this bias early. If parents argue, a young child may think, "This is my fault." They don't understand adult stress or conflict, so they assume they caused it. That idea can stick, even when it isn't spoken out loud. Over time, some people carry that habit into adult life. They feel responsible for moods, outcomes, or problems that have little to do with them. Personalization bias can raise anxiety. If you believe others are constantly reacting to your behavior, you feel watched. You may scan every interaction for signs of approval or rejection. You may replay conversations, looking for what you said wrong. These habits aren't based on facts. They're based on a guess that you were the cause of someone else's reaction. This bias also shows up in group settings. If a manager gives general feedback, you might assume it was aimed at you. If someone cancels plans, you might think it means they don't like you anymore. These thoughts happen quickly and feel convincing, especially when your mood is already fragile. The brain connects vague information to the most available story, your own. Social media can make this worse. A vague post can lead you to wonder, was that about me? If someone doesn't respond to your message, you assume they're upset. You don't think about how busy they might be or how many notifications they get. Your brain takes the silence and writes a story with you in the center of it. Personalization bias can cause strain in relationships. If one person often assumes blame, they may apologize for things that weren't their fault. They may feel guilt where none is needed. Over time, this can lead to resentment or imbalance. The other person may not even know the blame is happening. The weight is carried quietly. This bias doesn't always lead to negative feelings. Sometimes it makes people feel more important than they are. If a colleague changes their work style, you may think it's in response to something you did. If someone doesn't greet you one morning, you assume it's a snub. But maybe they were distracted or thinking about something else. The truth may have nothing to do with you, but the assumption is hard to shake. The brain prefers simple, personal explanations. "It's about me" is faster to process than "it could be about many things." That makes personalization a default when information is unclear. You fill in the blanks with the story that fits your perspective. You can see this in public places too. If a stranger looks in your direction and frowns, you might think you did something wrong, but they could be deep in thought, reacting to a text, or annoyed about something else. You still feel the sting because your mind linked their face to your presence. You can also feel this bias during setbacks. If a job application is rejected, you may believe you failed in some personal way. You may not consider the competition, the timing, or the company's needs. Instead, you think, "They didn't want me." That response comes from the urge to tie events to your own identity, even when broader factors are involved. Recognizing personalization bias doesn't erase it, but it gives you room to question it. You can pause and ask, what evidence do I have that this is about me? What else could explain their behavior? Would I say the same thing to a friend in this situation? Over time, you can learn to separate your actions from other people's choices. Someone's silence may mean they're tired, not upset. Someone's change in tone may reflect their own stress, not your mistake. You can still reflect on your role. but without assuming everything starts and ends with you. Personalization bias makes the world feel tightly connected to your every move. That can lead to guilt, worry, or false confidence. But when you notice the bias, you can give others the space to be complex, busy, and human just like you. You try to explain a task that feels simple to you. The other person stares blankly. You repeat yourself, maybe slower, but they still don't get it. You feel surprised. You think, this isn't hard, but what's clear to you isn't clear to them. That's the curse of knowledge. Once you know something, it becomes hard to picture what it was like not to know it. This shows up often when teaching or giving instructions. A person who understands a process deeply might skip steps when explaining it. They assume the basics are obvious. They use jargon without realizing. They expect others to keep up because the logic feels straightforward in their own head. But to someone hearing it for the first time, it's not. This happens because the brain rewires itself as you learn. When a skill becomes second nature, tying a shoe, using software, driving a car, you stop noticing the smaller moves inside it. You've compressed the steps. You no longer think, hold lace A, loop lace B, and so on. You just do it. That makes it hard to explain to someone who still needs every detail. The curse of knowledge can also affect writing. If you know a topic well, you may write about it in a way that feels clear to you but loses the reader. You might pack in too much information or assume the reader knows key terms. You skip context. You don't notice the missing pieces because your mind fills them in automatically. It shows up in workplaces too. A manager may give an assignment using shorthand language or vague goals, thinking everyone understands. But the team may not know where to begin. New employees often feel this most. They miss unspoken rules, informal habits, and background knowledge that longtime staff take for granted. The more experienced someone is, the harder it is for them to explain the job clearly to a beginner. This bias can even affect empathy. When you've mastered a skill or concept, it's easy to forget what learning it felt like. You might judge others who struggle or assume they're not trying hard enough. You may not remember your own early mistakes because your memory now works from a different point of view. That shift makes it harder to teach with patience or listen with care. Researchers tested this with a simple tapping game. One group tapped out songs on a table, like "Happy Birthday." Another group tried to guess the song. The tappers expected the songs to be easy to identify because the tune was clear in their minds. But the guessers often couldn't tell what the song was. The tappers had the melody in their heads, but the guessers only heard disconnected taps. That gap in understanding showed how hard it is to separate what you know from what others don't. The curse of knowledge also plays a role in design. A website or app may make sense to its creators, but users get lost. The designers can't unsee the structure. They know what each button does, but first-time users don't have that map in their heads. That's why user testing is important. It brings fresh eyes and reveals gaps in logic that insiders miss. This bias can affect parenting. A parent may expect a child to grasp cause and effect or pick up subtle social rules just because the parent understands them. But the child may need help breaking those ideas down. What seems like common sense to an adult is often brand new to a child. Without realizing it, the adult may skip steps that would make learning easier. In arguments, the curse of knowledge can widen the gap between people. If you're deep in a topic, science, law, politics, you may assume others know the facts you know. You might sound impatient or dismissive when they ask questions. But their confusion often comes from missing context, not lack of effort. If you can step back and explain from the ground up, you build trust and clarity. Avoiding this bias takes awareness. You have to pause and ask, what did I learn first? What would I not know if I were new to this? You can try to see your message from the other person's side. You can check their understanding instead of assuming it. If they seem lost, it doesn't mean they're slow. It means your message skipped a rung on the ladder. One way to break the curse is to explain things out loud as if you were teaching a child. This forces you to slow down, simplify, and test your own clarity. You might realize you've been relying on unstated assumptions or vague shortcuts. Clarifying those gaps helps the other person, and it also sharpens your own thinking. Once you know something, it feels obvious, but that doesn't mean it is. The curse of knowledge makes it hard to notice the invisible steps that got you where you are. Recognizing that blind spot is what helps you teach better, communicate more clearly, and meet others where they are, not where you think they should be. You hear a statement once, "Coffee stunts your growth." You don't think much about it. Then someone else says it. Later, you see it in a comment thread or hear it in a podcast. You start to feel like it's probably true, but it's not. It never was. This is the illusory truth effect. It's the tendency to believe something is true simply because you've heard it more than once. The mind uses shortcuts to make sense of information. One of the strongest shortcuts is familiarity. When something feels familiar, it feels easier to process. That ease makes it feel more likely to be true. This isn't a logical process. It's automatic. The brain prefers things that feel smooth and familiar, and repetition creates that feeling. This effect was first tested in the 1970s. Researchers showed people random statements, some true and some false. They asked people to rate how believable each one was. Then, days later, they showed the same statements again, mixed with new ones. The false statements that were repeated were rated as more believable than new false ones. The more often people saw a false claim, the more true it felt. It doesn't take many repeats. Even hearing or reading something twice can increase its credibility. This works across topics: science, history, health, politics. Once the brain feels like it's seen something before, it stops asking questions. It shifts from "is this accurate?" to "this seems familiar," which is often enough to get a nod of agreement. This becomes more powerful when people are distracted, tired, or overwhelmed. In those states, the brain leans harder on shortcuts. It's easier to believe something that feels familiar than to stop and check it. That's why repetition in headlines, slogans, or sound bites works so well. People don't need to agree at first. They just need to hear it enough. Marketing and advertising use this effect all the time. Product slogan repeats the same few words. You hear them on the radio, see them on packaging, and read them in ads. Even if you don't think the slogan means much, it sticks. It becomes linked with the product in your mind. Familiarity builds comfort, and comfort builds trust. The same thing happens in political messaging. A phrase like fake news or tax relief gains power because it's used often, not because it's explained or supported. Over time, people adopt these phrases even if they don't know their origin or full meaning. The repetition makes them feel like common sense. Social media accelerates this effect. Posts are shared, liked, and repeated across platforms. A false claim may appear in many forms: memes, headlines, short videos, quotes. It doesn't matter if some versions are sarcastic or critical. Every repeat increases familiarity. Even when people say, "I don't believe this," their brains still store the content. Later, when they hear it again, it feels familiar, and that feeling leans toward belief. This effect can cause serious problems in public health. If false claims about vaccines or treatments get repeated, they gain credibility just by being heard often. People may say, "I've heard that somewhere," and take it as a sign of truth. It's not about logic. It's about memory and ease of recall. It also affects personal relationships. If someone keeps hearing that a person is difficult or unreliable, they may start to believe it, even if they've had no direct issues. The more times something is said, the more it shapes perception. Gossip spreads this way. Repetition turns rumor into belief, even without proof. You can see this in school as well. If a student hears repeatedly that they're not a math person, they may start to believe it. The message doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be repeated over time. Eventually, it feels like a fact. The illusory truth effect doesn't depend on intelligence. It affects everyone. Even people who think critically can fall for it when they're distracted or when the repeated claim fits something they already believe. That's another layer: confirmation bias. If a repeated false claim supports your current view, it becomes even easier to accept. One way to protect against this is to ask where a statement comes from. When you hear something, especially more than once, pause and ask, "Who said this? What's the evidence?" Don't assume that hearing something a few times makes it valid. It might just mean it's been said a lot. Another way to resist the effect is to slow down. When you hear a claim that triggers a reaction, whether it sounds right or wrong, give it a moment. Repetition creates comfort, not proof. Feeling sure doesn't always mean being right. The more aware you are of that gap, the less likely you are to mistake familiarity for fact. You can also help others by repeating true information. If truth is quiet and lies are loud, the lies win. The same rules of repetition apply in reverse. When you repeat accurate, useful messages, they too become easier to believe. The brain doesn't care if something is true. It cares if it's easy to process. So make truth easier to reach. Repeat it clearly, calmly, and often. You're in a store, unsure whether to buy something. A salesperson walks over, explains a few features, and as they hand you the item, they lightly touch your arm. You nod and say yes. Later, you wonder why you agreed so quickly. That small touch may have made the difference. This is the power of touch. A brief, non-intrusive tap can increase trust, lower resistance, and make people more open to requests. Touch is one of the oldest forms of human communication. Long before we spoke, we reached out with our hands. A touch can signal comfort, concern, agreement, or attention. It's fast, direct, and physical. In most social settings, even a light touch can influence how someone feels about the interaction, without them realizing it. Researchers have tested this in many ways. In one study, people were more likely to return a lost object when the person who dropped it had touched them briefly. In another, diners tipped more when the server touched their arm or shoulder while handing them the check. Even those in a rush were more likely to stop and help someone who had lightly touched them during the ask. The results repeated across age, gender, and setting. Touch didn't need to be long or intense. It just needed to be there. This effect works because touch creates a moment of connection. The brain registers it as a signal. Someone is here, they're close, and they've acknowledged me. That can soften defenses. It doesn't mean someone becomes easy to fool. It means they feel slightly more seen, slightly more open. The touch adds warmth to the interaction. In small doses, it reduces distance. It also adds weight to words. A light tap during a request makes the request stand out more. The touch captures attention and links it to the moment. It tells the brain, this part matters. It's not about manipulation. It's about how attention and emotion link through the senses. In medical settings, this can be especially important. A doctor who briefly touches a patient's arm while giving news may come across as more empathetic, even if their words are the same. The gesture gives a sense of presence. It says, you're not alone. Many patients later report feeling better about visits where touch was used, even when the appointment was short. Touch also plays a role in teaching and leadership. A coach who places a hand on a player's shoulder during feedback may be more effective than one who keeps distance. The same goes for teachers. When used appropriately, a quick touch can show support, increase focus, and make a student feel more connected. The words stay the same, but the touch changes the tone. That said, context matters. Not every culture or individual welcomes touch. Some see it as too personal or invasive. That's why subtlety and timing are key. The touch should be light, brief, and respectful. It works best when it feels natural, not forced. A handshake, a pat on the back, a touch on the arm. These are common, accepted forms in many places. Anything more can feel awkward or cross boundaries. People often underestimate how much touch affects behavior. In an experiment at a library, staff gave patrons their change with or without a light touch. The ones who were touched rated the service more positively, even though everything else was identical. Another study in a grocery store found that customers who were touched were more likely to sample a product and more likely to buy it. The effect wasn't huge, but it was consistent. Touch also plays a role in building relationships over time. Friends who greet with a hug or a handshake tend to feel closer. Couples who touch more tend to report higher satisfaction. Even among coworkers, appropriate physical contact, like a high five or a hand on the back during praise, can build rapport. The gesture adds weight to the message. It says, this isn't just routine. I mean this. Touch isn't magic. It won't override clear disagreement or force someone to say yes, but it nudges people toward connection. It lowers tension. It adds a layer of nonverbal information that often supports the spoken message. And because it happens so fast, people rarely point to it as the reason for their reaction. They just feel slightly more positive. This can even affect memory. People tend to recall conversations more clearly when they included light, positive touch. The moment felt more personal. It stood out from routine exchanges. That can help in teaching, persuasion, or care work, where lasting impressions matter. In conflict, touch can ease tension when words stall. A calm hand on the table or a brief touch on the forearm can signal willingness to listen. It doesn't fix everything, but it can make space for better talk. When anger or fear runs high, that quiet signal can carry more than a long explanation. The power of touch lies in its simplicity. It doesn't ask for attention, it creates it. It doesn't push, it invites. When used with care, it adds something words alone can't always deliver. A physical signal of presence, trust, and connection. You walk past a poster that says warmth, then meet someone new. You describe them as friendly without knowing why. Later, you're asked to rate a product right after hearing the word trust. You give it a higher score than usual. You don't feel influenced, but you were. This is semantic priming. It happens when words that relate to certain ideas subtly shape how you think, feel, or choose just by being nearby. The effect is automatic. You don't need to read the word carefully or even pay much attention. Just being exposed to a related word can make your brain more likely to reach for certain thoughts or associations. For example, if you hear the word doctor, you'll respond faster to the word nurse than to the word bread. Your brain connects concepts based on meaning. The first word lights up a network of related ideas, making those more available than unrelated ones. This isn't limited to word games or memory tests. Semantic priming can affect decisions, behavior, and perception. In one experiment, people who were primed with words related to politeness were less likely to interrupt a conversation. Others, primed with words tied to rudeness, interrupted sooner. The words had shaped behavior without anyone noticing the link. In another study, researchers showed participants a set of words tied to the elderly. Words like Florida, retired, slow, and gray. After reading them, the participants walked down the hall more slowly than those who hadn't seen those words. The words activated an idea, old age, and that idea subtly influenced physical movement. No one thought, I'm acting old now. It just happened. Semantic priming works because your brain stores meaning in networks. When you hear or read a word, your brain activates nearby words in that network. If the word is cold, you might start thinking of snow, ice, or winter. If the word is angry, your brain might prime fight, yell, or storm. That activation happens fast and usually beneath your awareness. But once those words are active, they can tilt the direction of your thoughts. Advertisers use this without calling attention to it. A commercial for a drink might use words like crisp, clean, and pure. You don't have to focus on those words directly. Just hearing them can shape how you feel about the product. Later, you might describe the drink as refreshing, not because of the taste, but because the surrounding words shaped your expectation. This works in politics too. A candidate may use words like family, safety, and tradition. Those words don't offer facts, but they prime certain emotional responses. They trigger values and feelings that stick to the message. If another candidate uses words like change, progress, and future, they're triggering a different set of ideas. The facts may be similar, but the language leads you in different directions. Even news reporting is shaped by priming. A report about crime that uses the word predator may lead readers to support harsher punishment. A report that uses the word struggle may lead to more sympathy. The same event can feel different depending on which words surround it. The words guide interpretation more than people realize. This can even shape self-perception. If someone sees words related to intelligence, clever, sharp, bright, before taking a test, they may perform better. If they see words tied to failure, dull, confused, slow, their performance may drop. The words don't change ability. They change mindset. They prime certain beliefs about the self which affect focus and confidence. In workplace settings, priming affects teamwork and morale. If a meeting starts with words like collaboration, solution, and shared, people may work together more smoothly. If it starts with words like deadline, pressure, and problem, people may feel more stressed and less cooperative. The tone of the meeting has been set before any real decisions are made. This also appears in hiring and evaluation. If someone's resume contains words that echo leadership, like driven, initiated, organized, it primes the reader to look for signs of competence. If the words suggest support roles, like assisted, helped, or managed under, the reader may not notice leadership even if it's present. The words nudge expectations. The effect isn't limited to reading or listening. It can also happen through visuals or environmental cues. A room decorated with books and academic words can prime people to take tasks more seriously. A space with playful language and colorful signs can prime creativity. The words become part of the mental atmosphere, quietly shaping the way people approach what they're doing. You can also see semantic priming in legal settings. Jurors who hear words like victim, attack, or danger may judge more harshly than those who hear incident, event, or conflict. The words don't change the facts of the case, but they tilt how those facts are framed and remembered. Small shifts in phrasing can produce large shifts in outcome. Social dynamics are shaped by it too. If someone is introduced with positive words, kind, honest, hardworking, others tend to view their actions through that lens. If negative words appear early, difficult, stubborn, unreliable, people may interpret the same behavior differently. Once an idea is activated, it takes over the filter. This happens in everyday choices as well. People asked to solve puzzles with money-related words were more likely to act selfishly in later tasks. Those primed with community-related words were more likely to cooperate. The words activated mental frames, competition versus collaboration, and those frames shaped behavior. It's important to understand that this isn't about gullibility. The effect operates beneath awareness. It doesn't require belief or attention. Just being exposed to a word can shape the kinds of thoughts that follow. It's a mental nudge, not a command. But the direction of that nudge can have real effects. Semantic priming shows how sensitive the brain is to language. Words don't just carry meaning, they shape it. A single word can tilt perception, mood, memory, or action. That makes language a powerful tool. When we use it carefully, we can guide thinking in helpful ways. When we ignore it, we risk being led by whatever words happen to be nearby. The influence is quiet, but steady. It works through the paths our minds walk every day, word to word, thought to thought, without asking for permission. You walk past a poster that says warmth, then meet someone new. You describe them as friendly without knowing why. Later, you're asked to rate a product right after hearing the word trust. You give it a higher score than usual. You don't feel influenced, but you were. This is semantic priming. It happens when words that relate to certain ideas subtly shape how you think, feel, or choose just by being nearby. The effect is automatic. You don't need to read the word carefully or even pay much attention. Just being exposed to a related word can make your brain more likely to reach for certain thoughts or associations. For example, if you hear the word doctor, you'll respond faster to the word nurse than to the word bread. Your brain connects concepts based on meaning. The first word lights up a network of related ideas, making those more available than unrelated ones. This isn't limited to word games or memory tests. Semantic priming can affect decisions, behavior, and perception. In one experiment, people who were primed with words related to politeness were less likely to interrupt a conversation. Others, primed with words tied to rudeness, interrupted sooner. The words had shaped behavior without anyone noticing the link. In another study, researchers showed participants a set of words tied to the elderly. Words like Florida, retired, slow, and gray. After reading them, the participants walked down the hall more slowly than those who hadn't seen those words. The words activated an idea, old age, and that idea subtly influenced physical movement. No one thought, "I'm acting old now. It just happened." Semantic priming works because your brain stores meaning in networks. When you hear or read a word, your brain activates nearby words in that network. If the word is cold, you might start thinking of snow, ice, or winter. If the word is angry, your brain might prime fight, yell, or storm. That activation happens fast and usually beneath your awareness. But once those words are active, they can tilt the direction of your thoughts. Advertisers use this without calling attention to it. A commercial for a drink might use words like crisp, clean, and pure. You don't have to focus on those words directly. Just hearing them can shape how you feel about the product. Later, you might describe the drink as refreshing, not because of the taste, but because the surrounding words shaped your expectation. This works in politics too. A candidate may use words like family, safety, and tradition. Those words don't offer facts, but they prime certain emotional responses. They trigger values and feelings that stick to the message. If another candidate uses words like change, progress, and future, they're triggering a different set of ideas. The facts may be similar, but the language leads you in different directions. Even news reporting is shaped by priming. A report about crime that uses the word predator may lead readers to support harsher punishment. A report that uses the word struggle may lead to more sympathy. The same event can feel different depending on which words surround it. The words guide interpretation more than people realize. This can even shape self-perception. If someone sees words related to intelligence, clever, sharp, bright, before taking a test, they may perform better. If they see words tied to failure, dull, confused, slow, their performance may drop. The words don't change ability. They change mindset. They prime certain beliefs about the self which affect focus and confidence. In workplace settings, priming affects teamwork and morale. If a meeting starts with words like collaboration, solution, and shared, people may work together more smoothly. If it starts with words like deadline, pressure, and problem, people may feel more stressed and less cooperative. The tone of the meeting has been set before any real decisions are made. This also appears in hiring and evaluation. If someone's resume contains words that echo leadership, like driven, initiated, organized, it primes the reader to look for signs of competence. If the words suggest support roles, like assisted, helped, or managed under, the reader may not notice leadership even if it's present. The words nudge expectations. The effect isn't limited to reading or listening. It can also happen through visuals or environmental cues. A room decorated with books and academic words can prime people to take tasks more seriously. A space with playful language and colorful signs can prime creativity. The words become part of the mental atmosphere, quietly shaping the way people approach what they're doing. You can also see semantic priming in legal settings. Jurors who hear words like victim, attack, or danger may judge more harshly than those who hear incident, event, or conflict. The words don't change the facts of the case, but they tilt how those facts are framed and remembered. Small shifts in phrasing can produce large shifts in outcome. Social dynamics are shaped by it too. If someone is introduced with positive words, kind, honest, hardworking, others tend to view their actions through that lens. If negative words appear early, difficult, stubborn, unreliable, people may interpret the same behavior differently. Once an idea is activated, it takes over the filter. This happens in everyday choices as well. People asked to solve puzzles with money-related words were more likely to act selfishly in later tasks. Those primed with community-related words were more likely to cooperate. The words activated mental frames, competition versus collaboration, and those frames shaped behavior. It's important to understand that this isn't about gullibility. The effect operates beneath awareness. It doesn't require belief or attention. Just being exposed to a word can shape the kinds of thoughts that follow. It's a mental nudge, not a command. but the direction of that nudge can have real effects. Semantic priming shows how sensitive the brain is to language. Words don't just carry meaning, they shape it. A single word can tilt perception, mood, memory, or action. That makes language a powerful tool. When we use it carefully, we can guide thinking in helpful ways. When we ignore it, we risk being led by whatever words happen to be nearby. The influence is quiet, but steady. It works through the paths our minds walk every day, word to word, thought to thought, without asking for permission. You walk into a room painted blue, and you feel a little calmer. You pick up a product in bright red packaging, and it seems more urgent or exciting. You don't stop to think about why. You just feel it. This is how color psychology works. Colors influence your emotions and decisions without asking for attention. The response happens fast and often below your awareness. Color affects the brain through association. Over time, you link certain colors with specific ideas, feelings, or situations. Red may bring up thoughts of danger, heat, or energy. Blue may feel steady or cool. Yellow might suggest warmth or alertness. These links are shaped by experience, culture, and even biology. You don't need to learn them through study. You feel them through daily life. Marketers use this to shape perception. A food brand might use red to increase appetite. A cleaning product might use white or light blue to signal freshness. Financial institutions lean on navy or dark green to project trust and stability. These choices aren't random. The color of a logo or label shapes how a product feels, even before you know what it does. This also plays out in shopping behavior. In stores, red signs often mark sales or urgency. They catch the eye and push action. Blue signs can make the space feel more relaxed and organized. If a store wants you to linger, it might use warm, soft colors. If it wants to push quick decisions, it might use high contrast and sharper tones. Color becomes part of the setting's language. Online, color drives clicks. A bright green or orange button might increase how often people click it. A dark background can make a website feel sleek or serious. A light one might feel open or easy to navigate. Designers test colors not just for looks but for results. A small shift in shade can change how many people take action. The effect goes beyond buying. In workspaces, color shapes focus. Offices painted blue or green may support longer periods of concentration. Red can increase alertness for short tasks but may also increase tension over time. Yellow might feel cheerful in small doses but distracting in large ones. Even the color of the lighting can change how people feel. Cooler light can improve focus. Warmer light may feel more welcoming. In hospitals, color choices aim to reduce stress. You'll see soft greens, blues, or beige tones, colors tied to nature and calm. These shades lower visual noise. They give patients and staff a setting that feels more stable, especially under stress. If the space used red or black, it might increase anxiety without anyone knowing why. Clothing works the same way. Wearing black may signal control or seriousness. Bright red might suggest boldness or power. Soft colors may feel more open or passive. People often respond to these signals without noticing. They may trust, avoid, or follow based in part on what someone is wearing. Color becomes part of the message. Cultural factors play a role too. In some cultures, white signals purity. In others, it's tied to mourning. Red may mean luck in one place and danger in another. But some color responses seem to go deeper than culture. Infants often show a preference for bright, high-contrast colors. The eye and brain react to color from the earliest stages of development. You also see color psychology in sports. Teams may wear bold, high-energy colors to create a sense of power. Fans respond. Even referees may respond. Studies have shown that athletes in red uniforms are more likely to win in judged events like wrestling. The color seems to change how people rate performance, not just how players feel. Color also changes how you perceive time. In one study, people placed in a red room felt that time passed more slowly. In a blue room, they felt it passed more quickly. The environment shaped their internal clock, even though no one told them to feel differently. The brain takes in the cues and adjusts its pace. Mood follows color as well. People in gray or dark environments may feel lower energy or less optimism. In bright, colorful settings, mood may lift. This doesn't mean color fixes emotions, but it nudges them. It adds weight to what you're already feeling. A dull room can make boredom heavier. A bright room can make excitement easier to reach. Restaurants use color to guide flow. Fast food chains often use red, orange, or yellow. These colors are tied to hunger and speed. They keep customers alert and moving. Upscale restaurants may use darker tones or low light to slow things down and raise the sense of formality. The food may stay the same, but the color changes how it's received. Even in personal spaces, color affects behavior. A bedroom painted soft blue or green may support sleep better than one in bright red. A kitchen in warm tones may feel more social. A study space in cool shades may help with focus. The effect is subtle but steady. You don't think about it often, but you live inside it. Color psychology doesn't work the same for everyone. Your response depends on personal history, mood, and context. But patterns exist. The human brain is wired to react to light and color. These reactions shape mood, focus, and behavior in ways that feel natural, even though they come from design. The next time you feel a shift in your mood when you enter a room, stop and notice the color. Ask whether it's calming you down, speeding you up, or pushing you in a direction. You may not change your decisions because of it, but you'll understand the subtle force that helped shape them. You wake up on a Monday and decide to start eating better. You promise to get serious about your goals after your birthday. You hold off on a project until the first of the month. These patterns aren't random. They come from how the brain responds to temporal landmarks, dates that feel like a break from the past and a clean point to begin again. A temporal landmark marks time in a way that feels meaningful. It could be a new year, a birthday, the start of a school term, or even just the first day of the week. These moments give people a sense of mental separation between old me and new me. That separation makes it easier to shift behavior. It creates a kind of mental reset. Research shows that people are more likely to commit to goals right after these landmarks. Gym signups go up in January. People start diets on Mondays. Searches for the word diet spike after major holidays. What's happening isn't just habit, it's structure. The date gives the change a boundary. You leave one chapter behind and start another. This effect happens in small ways too. A person might say, "I'll start that tomorrow." Even if tomorrow is just Tuesday, they may feel sluggish on a Thursday, then feel more focused on Friday simply because the weekend is near. The calendar doesn't change who they are, but it changes how they view time. That shift can make action feel easier. Temporal landmarks don't need to be official. Some people create their own. The end of a job becomes a marker. So does a breakup, a move, or even a bad day that triggers reflection. Once someone decides, "That was the old version of me," they start thinking about what the new version should look like. The date or event becomes the dividing line. This sense of a fresh start affects motivation. People feel more hopeful after a landmark. They feel less burdened by past failures. If you've missed 10 workouts in a row, the first of the month gives you a reason to try again. It feels easier to forgive past slips when a new cycle begins. That's not just optimism, it's a shift in mental accounting. When people track goals, they often reset their data around these points. Fitness apps ask for start dates. Budgeting tools begin with the month. Progress charts usually show week-by-week updates. These designs follow the brain's preference for time chunks. It's easier to think in pieces, weeks, months, quarters, than in one long stretch. Landmarks give each piece a beginning. This structure also makes people more likely to plan. If you ask someone to start a new habit today, they may hesitate. If you say, "Start next Monday," they often agree. The delay gives them time to prepare. But more than that, Monday feels like a clean place to start. It has no baggage yet. That mental freshness helps them commit. Workplaces use this effect too. New hires often begin at the start of a pay period or a new quarter. Teams review performance at the end of a month. Planning meetings happen near the start of the week. These patterns don't just fit schedules. They fit how people think about progress. Starting at a clear point makes the path ahead seem easier to map. This also shows up in education. Students feel more ready to focus at the start of a semester. Teachers often introduce new rules or routines at those points. Even when the content stays the same, the sense of beginning helps attention and effort. It gives people permission to take things seriously. Some people use birthdays in the same way. Turning 30, 40, or 50 becomes a reason to reflect. They think about goals, habits, and regrets. The number makes them pause and think, what comes next? The birthday doesn't change their skills or values, but it signals time passing. That signal makes them think harder about direction. Holidays play a similar role. New Year's Day is the most obvious example, but so are religious holidays, national days of remembrance, or even personal anniversaries. Each one acts as a check-in point. Even if people don't act on every intention, the moment makes them stop and ask, what do I want now? That question opens the door to action. The strength of a temporal landmark depends on how it feels. A random Tuesday doesn't carry weight unless you give it meaning. But once you name it, this is the start of my new routine, your mind starts to cooperate. You're more willing to try again. The failure from last week feels less relevant. The new day gets treated as a new chance. That's why some people keep rituals around these dates. They journal, make plans, or clear space in their calendars. These actions build on the sense of newness. They send a message to the self. This is different from before. That message makes the next step feel more intentional. Temporal landmarks don't create discipline on their own, but they give structure to it. They help people set boundaries around change. They give emotional weight to a starting point. That weight supports effort. It makes plans feel real, and it helps people move past the noise of the past towards something they can shape. Someone tells you everything's fine, but something feels off. You can't point to anything specific, yet you don't believe them. Later, you realize it was the flicker of tension in their mouth or the quick glance away when they spoke. You caught a microexpression. These are small, fast facial movements that reveal emotion before the person has time to hide it. They last less than half a second. Most people don't notice them directly, but they still respond to them. Microexpressions happen when emotion leaks through the face before the brain can suppress it. The muscles around the eyes, mouth, or forehead tighten or shift in ways that match feelings like fear, anger, sadness, or contempt. These movements are quick and often involuntary. They reveal the emotion even when the words say something else. People pick up on these cues without needing formal training. You might not say, I saw a flash of anger in her brow, but you still adjust your response. You become more guarded, more cautious, or more supportive, depending on the emotion you sense. That's because the brain is tuned to spot signals of truth in the face, even when they're brief. This matters in conversation. A manager gives feedback and sees a flash of fear or irritation in the employee's face. Even though they're nodding and smiling, the manager may soften their tone or slow down. A friend says they're fine, but you see a quick look of sadness before they recover. You stay with them a little longer. These shifts in behavior come from microexpressions. They guide the emotional tone of social interaction. In law enforcement and security, officers are trained to watch for these cues. A traveler may answer questions calmly, but a brief look of fear or contempt might raise concern. In therapy, a client may claim they've moved on, but a flash of sadness or guilt shows that there's more beneath the surface. These signs don't prove anything on their own, but they give useful direction. They say, pay attention here. Microexpressions are the body's way of telling the truth, even when the person tries not to. Someone may want to hide anger in a meeting, but their eyebrows pull together for just a moment. They may want to seem confident during a pitch, but their lip trembles before they smile. The moment passes quickly, but it leaves an impression. These expressions are not always negative. Someone might flash a smile when they see you, then try to hide it for social reasons. A person may show surprise when they hear praise, even if they try to stay composed. These small signals give depth to interactions. They show that something real is happening behind the words. People often trust microexpressions more than spoken language, even without knowing why. In job interviews, a candidate who gives polished answers but shows brief signs of panic may come across as less confident. In relationships, a partner who says everything's fine but shows a flash of disgust or hurt may trigger more doubt than reassurance. The brain picks up what the face gives away. Children show microexpressions before they learn to mask emotions. A toddler's face often shifts freely from joy to fear to sadness. As people grow older, they learn to control facial muscles, especially in formal settings. But the microexpressions still appear. The emotional system reacts faster than the reasoning system can block it. Actors sometimes train to use microexpressions intentionally. A character might show guilt or regret in a flash before denying anything. The audience sees the truth for a moment and feels tension. The technique works because viewers are tuned in to those fast facial shifts. Even when they don't analyze it, they feel the emotional impact. In close relationships, people become more sensitive to each other's microexpressions. A couple that has been together for years can tell when something is wrong before a word is spoken. The shift in the eyes or mouth is enough. They may say, "What's wrong?" before they know what they saw. The connection depends on that kind of subtle awareness. Microexpressions are also linked to empathy. People who score high on empathy tests tend to be better at reading brief facial cues. Their brains respond more strongly to emotional expressions, even in short flashes. They may not describe what they saw, but they act on it. They offer support or pull back based on what the other person's face showed in that instant. Training can improve detection. Researchers have developed tools that flash faces for a fraction of a second, asking people to name the emotion. With practice, people get better at spotting sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and other core expressions. Still, even without training, the average person responds to these cues on a gut level. The effect is subtle but real. Microexpressions remind us that people communicate with more than words. The face tells a fast story. It reveals emotions that might not be spoken or even fully felt. These small signals help others respond with care, caution, or concern. Even if no one says, "I saw that," the message gets through. The face speaks in flashes, and the brain listens closely. Reverse psychology works by telling someone the opposite of what you want them to do. Sounds simple, and it is, but it works best when used lightly, especially with kids. When used too often, kids catch on. But in small doses, it taps into something strong, the desire to be independent and make their own choices. Let's say a child refuses to eat vegetables. You tell them, "Fine, you probably wouldn't like broccoli anyway." You turn your back. Within a minute, they may try it just to prove you wrong. That's reverse psychology in action. It works because kids want control. They don't want to feel pushed. Telling them they can't or shouldn't do something makes them want to decide for themselves. It's not magic, though. It works best when the stakes are low. You wouldn't use reverse psychology to get a child to take life-saving medicine, but you might use it to get them to put on their shoes. You probably can't get those shoes on before I count to 10. Now it becomes a challenge. They feel they're in control of the decision, even though you planted the idea. Timing matters. If a child is angry or upset, reverse psychology can backfire. If they feel mocked or tricked, they dig in their heels. So you use it when they're calm or mildly resistant, not when they're in full meltdown mode. The tone also matters. You don't smirk or tease. You speak in a flat, matter-of-fact way. You let the idea hang there and walk away. Take another example. A child won't clean up their toys. You say, "It's okay. I guess I'll just do it myself." You sigh, start picking them up. The child may step in, not always, but often. They want to feel grown up. They want to feel capable. They don't want you to think they can't do it. That's their pride kicking in. You used that to guide their behavior. Older kids catch on faster, so you have to be more subtle. A teenager won't take out the trash. You say, "It's not your job. I'll ask your brother." Now it becomes a matter of status. No teen wants to be seen as less capable or responsible than their sibling. They may grumble, but they do it. You didn't demand. You let them feel they chose it. Reverse psychology works best in kids around ages 3 to 10. At that age, they crave independence but still seek adult approval. They test limits. They want to say no just to feel in charge. When you tell them they can't do something, they want to prove they can. You sidestep the power struggle by offering the reverse of your real goal. Some parents worry it's dishonest, but it's not lying. It's guiding. You don't use it to manipulate serious choices. You use it to get past resistance in everyday routines. Getting dressed, brushing teeth, getting in the car. These are moments when a direct command triggers defiance. A small shift in wording can make all the difference. Let's look at brushing teeth. A child says no. You say, well, you don't have to brush. Your teeth might fall out, but it's your choice. Now it becomes theirs. They feel ownership. You're not telling them what to do. You're laying out the facts and letting them decide. That shift from control to choice changes how they respond. Sometimes it's about making it seem like they're not supposed to do something. A child won't go to bed. You say, you're not tired yet. Maybe stay up and read a bit. Now bedtime isn't a fight. They get in bed and read. Within minutes, they're asleep. You framed it as freedom, not a command. That freedom lowers the wall of resistance. This doesn't mean you give in. It means you reframe. You still set limits. You still expect behavior, but you don't always get there through direct orders. You lead from the side, not the front. It feels softer, but it works because kids crave power in their little world. Reverse psychology gives them the illusion of control while guiding them to the result you want. It works outside the home too. A teacher wants a student to try a harder book. The student resists. The teacher shrugs and says, "You're probably not ready for this one yet." Now the student wants to prove they are. You set a gentle challenge, not a rule. That's how reverse psychology sidesteps refusal. It's not foolproof. Some kids don't take the bait. Others see through it if you overuse it. That's why you use it sparingly. Once a week, not every day. You mix it with praise, with choices, with clear boundaries. Think of it as seasoning, not the whole meal. It adds flavor, nudges action, but it's not the core of your parenting approach. You also don't use it for major issues, lying, safety, respect. Those need direct, honest conversations. Reverse psychology belongs in the smaller moments where tension builds and choices feel stuck. It's a reset button that changes the tone of the interaction. The best way to learn how to use it is to try it once in a safe, low-stakes moment. The next time your child says no to something minor, step back and suggest the opposite. Watch what happens. If they bite, you've found an opening. If not, you try another approach next time. And remember, kids want to feel strong. They want to feel smart. When you make them feel like they're choosing, they step into that role. You're not tricking them. You're showing them they can choose right, even when they think it's their idea.